Good evening and welcome to the Gin and Tonic Show on Friday, the 20th of April 2018. And I want to welcome my co-panelists. Stop spamming. Speaker's Corner. Good evening, gentlemen. How are you guys?
All good, thank you.
Good. You've been a busy man as well, Steve.
Certainly have. Yes, so it's been pretty hectic down at the corner for the last few weeks.
Do you want to give us a little bit of an update before we carry on? Obviously, there's been some news for those that haven't followed that Tan has been refused re-entry into the country. So maybe you can give us a bit about that and then maybe go on, because there was an excellent video from you where you did a walk around Speaker's Corner, but I want you to sort of maybe share that to get us started.
Sure. Okay, so on Tan the man, my understanding is that he was here from Malaysia on a visitor's visa. I'm not quite sure how long it lasts in total, but basically with a visitor's visa, you can stay in the UK for up to 6 months at a time. Then you have to leave the UK and then you can come back, but you can come back for 6-month chunks. I'm not sure what the rules are about how long you have to be outside of the country between those 6-month chunks. But anyway, he went over to Paris and then attempted to return back into the UK, at which point they stopped him. They stopped him in Paris, so I assume he was going to get on the Eurostar. So yeah, they stopped him and didn't let him in. I don't know what specific reason they've given to him. And I guess the next development is that soon as Tommy Robinson found out what was going on, he wanted to fly over to France. So Tommy went over there last night and then filmed an interview with Tan at 5 o'clock in the morning, I think.
Yes, I saw it. He apparently drove there and fell asleep in the back of the car, so he didn't know where it was.
And I think they were trying to find a hotel to do the filming in, but they couldn't find one at that time of the day, so they just did it out on the street. So I don't know whether we'll find out from that video what reason was actually given to Tan, but obviously the internet is on fire with all the reasons that it might be, not least that because he's spoken out against Islam, that's why they've not let him in. But I think we'll have to wait to see what the actual reasons are. But yeah, I'm not surprised people are jumping to that conclusion, because obviously we know good old Tan doesn't hold back from saying what he thinks on the subject of Islam, to which they are none too keen on.
Well, they won't have that, obviously. But I do know that with a visitor's visa, you can be for 6 months, but then you have to leave for a minimum of 6 months.
Is that the rule?
Friends and family that have come and gone like that. So, he may have to be somewhere else, be that in France or Europe or somewhere else. France might be a bit more dangerous, because there's a lot more illegal immigrants and refugees and that lot there, and they won't hold back as much as the Speaker's Corner people. So
yeah, so I think speak English.
Yeah, maybe they don't speak English either, so that might help.
So I think if my memory serves me correct, I think Tan first arrived on the scene at Speaker's Corner around October last year. So his 6 months will be up. So if what you're saying, Rob, is right, that you have to be out for 6 months, then obviously that's going to be the reason that they didn't let him back in, and it might just be a straightforward. That's the rules.
That's what I was saying. Let's hold our judgment until we can actually find out, because otherwise people will jump to the conclusion that he was refused entry because he's critical of Islam, and that may or may not be the case. Now, they won't say that necessarily, or maybe they will actually say it like they did with Lawrence Southern and the others. But it could well be a case that he's just outstayed the visitor's visa, or there's so little time left on there and he doesn't have a flight leaving or some way to guarantee that he leaves the country, and that could be the reason why they've done that. So we'd have to wait and see. Cool. I think I actually filmed the very first video. Maybe I can find a link to it, but I think I filmed the first video ever with Tan. I could be mistaken, but the first time he came there, you're right, it was sometime last year, and some Muslim was shouting at some Christian, and he was quite quiet for a few moments, and then he sort of said to the guy, "Oh, are you Muslim?" The guy goes, "Yeah." He says, "Yeah, I thought so." And then he started, not as vocal as he's came to be later on. But then this Muslim got upset with him as well, and sort of, it's on my channel, I'll see if I can find it as we chat, and sort of said, "Hey, come with me for a walk down there, and we'll go down there," as if he was going to go and chat privately. Not really. He wanted to give him a slap, obviously. So I think I've got the first video. I'll see if I can find it on my list.
So I think, considering he's been coming to Speaker's Corner for just 6 months, I think he's made one hell of a mark in a very, very short space of time. It's hard to think of anyone else that's arrived in such a short space of time has become so absolutely infamous.
Yeah, but this is in our community, okay, in our sort of area.
Yeah, our bubble.
Yeah, our bubble. Exactly, that's a good expression. Yeah.
Yeah,
because I was surprised that people in the States, for example, Christians didn't know Dr. William Lane Craig. Where for us, he's like, yeah, what an idiot, blah, blah, blah. Everybody knows him. But Christians in the States,
Yeah, actually, I've got the video. I'll post it in the main chat here. And for you guys, I think this is the first video ever with Tan. I could be mistaken. Certainly the first one that I ever got with him, and that would have been in November. So maybe actually it wasn't the first one. So I might stand corrected there. There might have been ones prior to that. But this
good for the park. Aditya Mohan, what is good for the park that Tan has gone to France? Do you think he's going to open Speaker's Corner in Paris now, or what?
Yeah. What that
Raj, do you know whether he was in the UK on a visitor's, on a tourist, or on a business visa?
He was on a visitor's visa, I understand.
Because he said he was working, which he can't do on a visitor's visa.
That would be true. Yeah, no. So he dropped me an email because I've got his email address, because there was a few of us emailing connected with something else that I'll come on and share shortly. And he was due to be coming along to this meet that we were doing yesterday, and then he emailed us saying, sorry guys, I'm not going to be able to make it because they've stopped me coming back into the country. And I'm sure he said in one of those emails that it was a visitor's passport visa, which, yeah, of course would mean that he wouldn't be allowed to lawfully work while he was here.
Right.
Okay, so there's a whole variety of things. I think it's a pity. I think Tan was a welcome change for Speaker's Corner. Yes, he ruffled some feathers, and yes, he was confrontative. I don't necessarily agree with everything he did and the way he did it. I like the way that he did, though, and I like the way that he does not compromise. Okay, that this is very important for me, that somebody has a line, sticks to it, knows what he wants, and is absolutely on track with everything that he does. And this is what Tan, no questions, whatever, did to the extreme. Yes, but he did it, and that's why he got my respect.
And also, I think in the face of all sorts and all manner of violence and aggression, intimidation, he always remained calm and peaceful, and he never hit back. And I don't think there's many people that could have suffered the extent of bullying and intimidation that he suffered at the corner without ever hitting back physically.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. Abby, what's your thoughts, if you've followed it or know anything about it? But before you do that, Abby, before you give us your thoughts, please tell us what that avatar of yours is all about.
No, it's this frog was kind of a, what's it called, puppet show, kind of children's program in Scandinavia, I think during the 90s. Then I read an article from one of the major newspapers that they have identified this frog as some kind of national security threat, because in the same way as they identified Pepe the Frog as this. So first I thought it was some kind of April hoax, or you have the April joke maybe. And but they're actually serious. They think that this frog is going to be the new national security threat. So I just had to use it.
Is the Sesame Street?
Sesame Street.
The children's show that you were talking about.
No. This is a local Scandinavian.
Okay, all right. So it's the local version.
I don't think it runs anymore. It's like it ran in Norway, Sweden, and Denmark during the 90s.
Okay. And I need to react to what Aditya Mohan is saying. I also hope atheists are reduced to zero. Absolutely, I agree with you. And it's very easy. It's frightfully easy. Just bring evidence for the existence of a God, and they immediately disappear, all of them, and they're reduced to zero immediately when there's any kind of evidence for the existence of a God. It's that easy. Thank
Yes,
you.
and he's also said there, and I want to get back to Abu's thoughts on TAN in a second, but he also said the comments like, I want to reduce 1.6 billion to 1.6 million. Don't paint a good picture. Well, here's this. How about this, Adita? I want to reduce 1.6 billion to 0 Muslims. Now, ask me how. Because, of course, the moment TAN says that, what is the first thing people think? Some kind of violence, some kind of threats or intimidation. I want to reduce from 1.6 billion to 0. Ask me how. Critical thinking, getting them to change their minds. I want 1.6 billion ex-Muslims, or at best, agnostic Muslims like Hassan Radwan. I mean, if that's the sort of person I was on Vidovic's show last night. I said, if we had 1.6 billion Hassan Radwans on this planet, you know, we would have like an amazing number of or Muslims that label themselves Muslims in whatever sense, obviously not following the Qur'an necessarily. But there's many ways that you can say it. He obviously didn't say that, and he left it. So I think, you know, Tan did a bit of trolling as well. But all he had to say was, I just want them to do, which is my position, I just want them to use critical thinking, you know, don't believe things for bad reasons and no evidence. And that would reduce the number, especially if we could we don't want to indoctrinate, and we want to prevent indoctrination. And if we could do that, then, you know, we could reduce that number. And especially if we could have access to all of them and they were interested in finding out what is true.
He was the corner's best troll, and I think the funny thing is that the vast majority of it went completely over the top of their heads.
Yeah.
They just didn't get it.
Yeah, I agree. Your thoughts, Abu? What did you ever follow Tan, see any of his videos? Do you know who he is apart from us?
No, I know who he is. I think it's he increased the entertainment value of Speaker's Corner, but was he why wasn't he allowed to enter again? Is it confirmed that it was for like political reasons?
Because he was wearing a red jacket.
Because that makes it like, if they seriously gonna, like, was he not allowed to enter the country because of what he said at Speaker's Corner, or was it?
No, we don't know.
We don't know. Okay.
We don't know yet.
But do you have contact with him?
I've got email contact with him.
What does he say?
He keeps his cards close to his chest sometimes.
Okay.
That's a mystery at the moment, possibly, you know.
Yeah.
So.
There might be a kind of legal issue, maybe.
Yes, exactly. So maybe we hold judgment, and perhaps he comes back again in 6 months' time, or whatever the case is. Because I don't.
The other reason I'm not pushing him too much on it, because I'm leaving that to Tommy Robinson, quite frankly. So shall I come on to talk about that for a little bit?
Yes, yeah, please. And also your wander through Speaker's Corner and that video and so on.
The rules and everything. Yeah.
Find that while you're speaking as well. Go ahead.
Yeah. So firstly, we know Tommy Robinson came along to Speaker's Corner a few weeks ago now to read the speech of Martin Sellner after Martin Sellner wasn't allowed into the country, and obviously that's what people are now they're piecing things together, whether they should be or not. That, you know, it's now a whole series of people that are not being allowed back into the country, allegedly or not, because of what they want to say or what they want to believe. So anyway, so Tommy came a few weeks ago, and then firstly, I just wanted to say on that I, and I think quite a few other people have commented to me as well, that in recent weeks, since Tommy Robinson came and put a bit of a spotlight on the corner, there does seem to be a slight increase in the numbers of people coming along to Speaker's Corner, and also slight increase in younger people coming along. Because we know, you know, it's getting a little bit staid in its ways, and obviously the very large Dawa contingent that go along. But there has actually been a noticeable movement or change or increase in the number of people going, and even on weekends when the weather's been pretty dire. I think it was 2 or 3 weekends ago when it was, you know, raining pretty much all day on and off, and there was still a good proportion of people there. And not just the old regulars that we all expect to go. So, you know, I personally put that down to Tommy putting the spotlight on Speaker's Corner. You know, whatever you think of his views, I think he's genuinely put that spotlight on the corner, which, you know, as a huge fan of Speaker's Corner, I think is nothing but good.
More different people and different ideas and so on that can come down. The best. What we want, obviously, is an open, honest discussion, not like the Antifa lot. I saw a video with you were in it, It's like a short one from Content Over Everything. You were standing there, and there's a couple other people, and a woman had 2 young children there, and I think they were Antifa.
Yeah.
What was that all about? I mean, I saw the video, but maybe you could comment because you were there.
Yeah. Okay. So on Saturday, last Saturday, there was a Generation Identity conference, and I'll just say I don't support Generation Identity. Having read some of their stuff, some of it I agree with, but they are completely ethnocentric in terms of culture is all about ethnicity. We've got to protect our ethnicity. Well, that's how I read it, and that's not my game at all. But anyway, so they had a conference on Saturday. They had to keep the venue top secret because obviously the likes of Antifa just wanted to stop it and invade it, etc., etc. And they actually held it out in Sevenoaks, which, for those that you don't know, is sort of a little bit outside of London. And their conference, it started, and it was all being live streamed by a handful of people. But somehow Antifa found out where it was. And I think the conference started in the morning, then they broke for lunch, and then they reconvened after lunch in the afternoon. And the hotel or the venue, the hotel or pub or whatever it was that they were in, I think got wind that Antifa were on their way and actually asked them to finish the conference early. So I think they all went down the road to the local pub, and sort of after which there was a bit of a, how can I describe it? Bit of a fight in a car park, basically, with the Antifa thugs, including this charming mother with her 2 children, the youngest of which I would guess is about 9 or 10 years of age, and then an older one who might be 13 or 14. And again, this was all being live streamed, and there's quite a few videos of this Antifa Generation Identity fight in a Marks and Spencer's car park on the Saturday. She was there with her son, pretty much in the thick of it, and this poor young kid was bawling his eyes out and was clearly absolutely terrified of the situation that his mother had brought him into. And then, lo and behold, on Sunday, when a girl from 120 decibels, which is a German anti-rape group, came to Speaker's Corner to speak. Obviously, again, Antifa view that as, again, part of the racist far right. So again, Antifa turned up on Sunday in quite large numbers, actually, and there she was again with her child again. And there's a one Content Over Everything video where again the child is getting upset. So yeah, what a great mother.
Yeah, I'll try and find that video for people to watch. You were standing there, and Tan was there, and a couple of other people.
Yeah, and I mean, there was one guy who was sort of arguing against her, and we sort of persuaded him that that probably wasn't a good thing because it was the antagonism that she was facing that was upsetting the kids. So he probably did do a little bit more than I would have done in that situation, but we managed to stop him from doing that. So going back to Tommy Robinson. So Tommy Robinson's coming back to Speaker's Corner on the 6th of May. It's been well broadcast, and he's got quite a lot of people involved in it. So you might have heard of the Football Lads Alliance and the Veterans Against, I can't remember, this Veterans Against Terrorism, I think they're called. So they're all going to get involved, and I tell you, they will bring very large numbers with them. So I think with the advance notice, we're going to have tens of thousands of people coming along to this thing. Yes, so basically I think the plan is to start at Speaker's Corner and then march to the Twitter office, which is sort of just round the back of Piccadilly Circus, and then have a sort of gathering and speeches there in reaction to Tommy and others being banned from Twitter. So in preparation for the 6th of May, Tommy's been preparing a promo video. And he was really, really keen to get people from Speaker's Corner involved. And I know some people felt they were unable to or chose not to. But as you might have seen, Raj and I put our hands up. And so we went along to part of the production of this promo video yesterday, which is just basically filming short cuts of lots of different people. But he's got a huge. I won't name all of the names because I don't think he wants them to be broadcast yet, but it will be broadcast fairly shortly, I think. So some very well-known names from this sort of area, from Canada, from America, some ex-Brits that now live in America, so that might be a bit of a clue for you on who some of them might be. And I think some of them are even coming over for the 6th of May as well.
Was there any Muslims or anybody that might have been critical of him, or is it all people that kind of more are sympathetic to his view?
The latter, people that are generally more.
Rob, I was just going to ask, Steve, help! How well do you know Tommy Robinson, his background, and what he's about today at the moment?
At the moment,
or if you do, can you explain what he is about? Because I have no idea on what he's about and what to make of him, really. Because I like the way that he is. I mean, he's incredibly charismatic. I think he's a tough guy, and I think he has some very good views. But I'm not sure whether I would go and sign anything or sign off on anything that he will, promote. Because there are some controversial things he did in the past, but I don't know what he's about at the moment.
I would say at the moment, I think he became aware of Speaker's Corner a few months ago, and he became aware that what has been happening at Speaker's Corner. Oversimplification way of describing, the Islamification of Speaker's Corner, the fact that we've got this one group of people who, through their thuggish behaviour, are taking over. They're trying to silence opposition to them. He became aware of that, so he's kind of become very interested in specifically Speaker's Corner, but also the broader issue of free speech. That it's a very, very important aspect of British society, but not just British society, broader than British society, but it's important to us, and Speaker's Corner is a very big part of that. And I think he probably views that as symptomatic of other issues that we have in our society, where Islam has a disproportionate impact on so many things across our society. But I think I think he's viewing Speaker's Corner as a very good example that demonstrates that broader issue. So he's taking up the baton of free speech. Now, there will be people that will say something else, and that he's doing that for an ulterior motive, and his ulterior motive is just to bash Muslims. But as a staunch advocate of free speech and someone who's been going to Speaker's Corner for donkey's years, the fact that they're Muslims who are creating this negative situation at Speaker's Corner, they could be anything. In my view, and that it might be the fact that they're Muslims that's helped draw his attention to this subject.
Okay, but how much of a nationalist is he?
How much of a
nationalist?
Well, if you look at his online fingerprint, if you look at how many followers he gets on social media, across social media platforms, he is getting a very, very big audience. Now, obviously he's been banned off of Twitter, allegedly permanently. That's a big impact. But he does get a big social media interest. And that these days is important. We can't devalue that. The bottom line, which he acknowledges, is that he cannot stand for election, which I think I've mentioned before. Because of his criminal past, he cannot stand for a member of parliament. He can't even stand in a local council election. So that avenue is not available to him as a personal individual. So therefore, he wants to use other avenues. He worked for the Rebel Media, Canadian-based right-wing media company for a while. He just did that for a year, and I think he used that as a learning experience, which is why then he left Rebel Media, and now he's doing it himself. So making videos, putting blogs, putting stuff online to get his message out. Now, will he be successful? He has, let's all admit it. He is tarnished with the thuggery that was associated with the EDL, and that will be hard to shift. But
he has this anti-Islam stance, which, come on, I think every rational person has. But my question is still, how nationalist is he? How much does he try and will sort of go buddy, pally with this identity generation, with this thing, we are British, we need to be British, Britain first, this kind of sentiments. Does he really have this agenda on him?
Well, which agenda? Are you saying the ethnocentric?
Yes.
White supremacist?
Correct.
I don't.
Not white supremacist. No. I don't think the racist component is in here. No.
I don't believe he has on all of those things. But of course, the fact that he read a Martin Sellner speech, but he did make it clear before that it wasn't the speech, it wasn't the content of the speech, it was the issue that someone had been banned coming to the UK to say something at Speaker's Corner. There obviously is a risk because we know what generation identity are.
Okay, so what you are saying, I think, but you're not really saying it is, yes, there are some tendencies, but he will not be on the same level as a Martin, who is like a thoroughbred identity generation person. You don't think that Tommy is to the same extent, is that correct?
I don't think he is at all.
Okay, but he is a nationalist in that he wants to keep Britain for the British, not, albeit not only whites, but not Islam, the Islamification. He's still fighting Islamization.
Yes, that is
okay.
Yeah, that is his fight. He's certainly not white focused. It is not a race issue. It is not an ethnicity issue for him at all. He's what is he? Second generation immigrant himself.
Yeah, exactly. This is what everybody is. I mean, we all are, aren't we?
Yeah, so one. Yeah. But no, I genuinely don't believe all the muck that the media and the authorities throw at him on the subject of racism, Nazism, ethnocentric views. I don't believe any of it is correct.
Yeah, well, that's sensational, superficial, whatever stuff. This is just propaganda, yeah.
But it does leave an effect, doesn't it? In the sense that in the past, prior, I'd heard of him, I knew about him, but I was like, yeah, he's probably a bit right. I'm not going to, get involved. And obviously now, because he's sort of come to the fore a bit more in that sense, in where we often used to hang out or do hang out still. I haven't seen anything personally, but I wonder, Steve, since you've obviously, had conversations and perhaps you're in some way in touch, is there a way through you, or if you can put me in touch, that we can get him on the show here? Because I want to ask him those questions. Now, Sarah did an interview, but I'm not sure that he asked those questions. Maybe I missed it. I want to ask him all those questions and get his view. I'll go and do some research as well and try and find the things that he said in the past and ask, what did you mean by this? Where he said to the guy, hey, you're best off going back to Africa. Now, I've said that to my fellow South Africans, so nobody's going to claim I'm racist. When my fellow South Africans complained about UK being cold and miserable and all that, I'm like, why are you guys here? If you come to this country, you accept it. Otherwise, go back to South Africa. Nobody's going to claim I'm racist. So if somebody comes here and complains about this country, and he said, well, I don't think F off back to Africa, is that a racist comment? If somebody came from there and is not happy living in this country, I mean, it could have been a Chinese, it could have been an Eskimo, whoever it is. So again, that's the questions that perhaps will be useful to ask.
Yeah.
So if there's a way you can put me in touch, and then prepare to come on the show.
I doubt whether on a Friday night at 8 o'clock he'll be joining the Jinn&Tonic show, but there might be some avenue or some route where
we could do it another night. Obviously we can. Yeah. We did it for somebody else recently, and I'll do that for higher profile people who maybe are busy and so forth. We'll do it if necessary. I mean, ideally it's just Friday because everybody knows about it. But if we can, but if there's a way to put us in touch, because who we are, and obviously he's met you, so maybe you can say, hey, I come on the show. These guys are critical of Islam. They'd like to have a conversation with you. They might ask you some of those questions. But generally speaking, we agree with what we've heard so far. there's obviously been certain accusations made against him, and I would like to ask him those questions here on the show and for him to respond.
Excellent idea. Yeah, and I can understand Friday, he's, the Friday prayer at the mosque, he's busy. Yeah.
But I think, comments are just being made in the chat about, some of the racist comments that that we hear regularly at Speaker's Corner. And there is some rabidly racist stuff going on. Whether it's Abdul Hamid at AAA's just saying, or the old guy Omar is, calling people baboons and house Negroes and what have you. Absolutely vile stuff that's coming out the mouths of the Muslims at Speaker's Corner at the moment.
Did you? And okay, now we've been critical in the past of Saracen. He's been on the show here himself. I don't know if you saw it, Stops, but actually Saracen challenged this old guy Omar for being a racist Muslim, and said, "Hey, you're not our sort of Muslim, blah blah blah." Obviously, we've had our differences with him, and I'll see if I can find that video for people as well. So, were you there with that one, Steve, where Saracen came? I think you were, weren't you, with Omar sort of saying that the kalam is baboon and he's this, that, and the other thing.
Yeah. So
the thing is, Saracen, I mean, I'm very critical of him, still am, but he has changed, I must admit.
You're talking about Tommy?
Saracen.
In what way do you think he's changed? Again, I'll put the video in here. So here's the video with Saracen actually critiquing this Omar guy. Literally, Omar's there, and I think Steve was in the background there as well.
Yeah.
And so Saracen's having a full go, telling him how smelly he is and his beard's unkept, and he was surprisingly having a full go. So maybe he'll come back on the show again at some point.
So what I think when I look at Saracen today and half a year ago, I think he's more careful. I think he's more, for the lack of a better word, deep. In other words, that he thinks more about what he says, so that there are things that I can say, hell yeah, I think he's right here, which did not happen half a year ago. So I think there's a lot of, I don't know, a lot of knowledge, well, what do you want to call it? Information that has gone through his head that he has been able to process, which has changed his view on a couple of things, where he's no longer this thick, head through the wall kind of guy, where now he's a bit more cautious and he does tend to think a little bit more.
Well, he follows Abu Laith, I think it is. So maybe we can get this Abu Layfa on. He seems, I'm going to see if I can find the video on that as well. There was a video with them, and sort of Kalam was with them, and this guy was doing a conference or whatever the case was, and Kalam filmed part of it from what I could tell. And so he follows this Abu Layfa Imam fella. So maybe it'd be worth having him on, because obviously when we had him on, he always kept referring to, got to speak to the scholars on this. And you quite rightly pulled him up and said, don't you have some views that you can articulate yourself? So, maybe that's a possibility as well. Because we do often, as we do, invite Muslims on, but they seem reluctant at best to come on.
Well, this Abu Layth could actually come on, but then he calls himself a reformer, but all he does is just sort of reinterpret. Yeah,
as they all do, I guess. So last thing for you, Steve, before, obviously stay with us, please, because you would love to have your comments. But the other one more thing was your, which I've posted in the chat as well, your video where you sort of wandered around and you talked about collective worship. So if you could just bring us up to date on that.
Yeah, so I researched and found out who the sort of general manager of Hyde Park was, and got his email address and sent him off an email weeks and weeks ago. It's probably getting on 2 months ago now. Didn't hear anything at all. So then I found out who the chief executive of the Royal Parks is, and sent him an email. And basically in both these emails, I was, just trying to clarify, what is their position on this rule? It's on their website, it's their regulation. What's it all about? Does it still stand? Is it changed, and should it be enforced? Are they intending to change it? As I say, I didn't hear anything. A few days after I wrote to the chief executive, I then got a response from the Hyde Park manager, And that's the email that I put up in that video. And basically that was saying it's not a new regulation, it's very long standing, nothing's changed, and it still stands. But said that basically that the enforcers of it are the police, the Metropolitan Police. Made the point that obviously the police are an independent organisation to the Royal Parks, but basically saying that, you know, the Royal Parks expect the police to enforce it. So that was the bottom line of the email. And then a few days later, I also got pretty much the same email from the chief executive saying the same.
I've got the text here.
So the rule still stands, you know, collective worship, it's more than one person. We all know what worship is. Praying is obviously considered worship. They should not be doing it, and they should never have been doing it. But clearly it's not been enforced, or it's certainly not been enforced in my memory of going to Speaker's Corner.
Can you
so,
make a stop? Carry on, Steve, sorry.
Yeah, so clearly, I think, you know, I wasn't the only one that's been, you know, writing to them and contacting them and asking questions. And I know Andy, if you know Andy, the atheist that goes to Speaker's Corner, he'd been similarly writing to both the Metropolitan Police and the Royal Parks, both of which I think in response to Andy were kind of denying that it was their problem and just sort of pushing it over to the other side. But of course, what I discovered on that video, I thought, well, I'll actually try and track down the office, the building that these guys are based in. So I sort of wandered over, and it's only a couple of minutes walk away into the distance from Speaker's Corner, and then to lo and behold find out that they basically sit in the same bloody building. So the Royal Parks office and the Metropolitan Police for Hyde Park sit in the same building, and it's not a very big building. I think I said on the video they could probably shout at each other from one end to the other.
So could you see the red tape?
Sorry?
Could you see the red tape from one to the other?
Yes, piles of it. So, you know, all this nonsense of them fudging it and blaming the other, you know, absolutely ridiculous. But obviously, you know, so it's now become on the agenda, and why has it become on the agenda all of a sudden? Because we're all fed up with their praying, their call to prayer in the middle of the court, in the middle of Speaker's Corner, and the biggest change in recent months is them permanently putting down their mats, their prayer mats, from start to finish on a Sunday, and you know, lo and behold, anyone that goes near them. That's what's changed recently, and it's the steady creep of them taking over Speaker's Corner. And maybe people that don't go think that sounds a bit over dramatic, but you know, when you see the rolls of mats being rolled out in the morning, and the little thing at the front for the person that's leading the prayer to sort of be by, you know, that would have got bigger and bigger and bigger and bigger, and there would have been gazebos and tents put over it eventually, if we hadn't started to challenge it, which now clearly we have. And then I think it's last week or the last 2 weeks, the police have finally started to enforce it. And obviously the Dawa teams are absolutely livid about this.
Of course, it's a show of force. They're losing it.
Exactly.
Yes, and then I did see our wonderful friend who, again, we'll have him on the show here if he's up for it, but again, I suspect not. Hijab, who seems to think he's the general down at Speaker's Corner, deciding that
general.
yes, maybe because he's taller, he thinks maybe that gives him the right to say what he's going to lead the troops, so to speak. I'm not sure that all the troops are necessarily going to be led, but maybe they will. I mean, they sometimes have a sheepish behavior, so maybe it's easier, to do that than to say lead atheists. We all go in different directions. Like, why would you lead us? What's your qualification, type thing? But he was basically, so what they were trying to do is get through a loophole. Hey, if one person prays, and I actually agree with the police on this one, because it's exactly what you said, Steve. It's the creep. So they would go, hey, if it's one person, that's not collective worship, and you better, there was something about him saying literally, and then somebody did a thug life. I don't know if you've ever seen these thug life things where somebody says something that whoever does these thug life videos obviously appreciates, and the policeman, he says, right, police officers, you better apologize for this before it appears on the front page of a newspaper.
Yes,
you lose your jobs. And one of the policemen, it was actually the policeman that you shouted at, Steve, for getting rid of Tan. He said, no, we're not going to apologize. Yes. And you get this thug life with a pipe and his dark glasses and this chain come over this guy. It's hilarious.
But it says, I mean, this is why I put it on the screen. It says any event of a religious nature. So they can't go, because this is typical hijab. He reads something, but he doesn't understand it. And then he gets this idea that it must be collective or something. No, it doesn't say so. It's any event that is religious. That's it. Finished. End of story.
Yeah, well, I mean, the word collective has been bandied around, and so, you know, again, in his mind, he's like, okay, how can we circumvent this now? So if one guy prays and another guy prays 2 meters down the road there, you know, that's not collective worship. And the cop was going like, if anybody prays here, that's not acceptable. And I agree with him. Even if that wasn't written in there, I think that is the correct way, because all that'll happen is one will pray here and the next one will pray over there. And once you allow that to happen, then they'll all be praying just 1 meter apart and then claim it's collective worship. And so, you know, just outlaw, you know, that sort of thing, or prevent that from happening for everybody. Obviously, it's not just Muslims, but because they're the only ones who are doing it, you know, on a weekly basis, they're feeling chagrined, of course, without realizing that. And then, of course, you had people trying, oh, well, you know, people are not allowed to film and make money off it. So, hey, if they want to stop filming, and Speaker's Corner will hurt the Muslims way more than anybody else. So you can play with that red herring if you like. I mean, the brain power here is just non-existent, really.
And at least you're doing something, because in Paris they were not. And all of a sudden you had Muslims driving 30, 40, 50 kilometers just to go into town to make a show of force there, to go and make a point of praying in the street, to show we are here and we're not going away. And this is what is being nipped in the bud, and I welcome it.
Yeah, agreed. And so the very, very last thing, Steve, then obviously with that same thug life police officer who goes, you know, no, we won't apologize. There was another video of Tan obviously shouting, you know, F Islam, F X, Y, and Z. And then a police officer came into this little circle that was around him. These Muslims are like, you know, just like flies to a flame. They can't avoid it. They just cannot. They keep, you know, hijab and these other guys say to them, no, walk away. They just can't help themselves. It's like they want to, but the body gets drawn there towards Tan, and that's like magnetic, and they're fighting it, but they can't help it. They've got to go and stand around there and look mean and all the rest of it. And so this police officer walked up there, looked at his face, and he's got the reverse of a swastika, which I think is a Buddhist symbol or whatever the case is. And so the police officer looked at his face and basically said along the line, Steve, I think you were there and you were shouting, and rightly so, that mark on your face, because of that mark on your face, I consider that a breach of, what is it? What was the words you used, Steve? Public order.
I forget the precise
and I'm asking
words of it.
just the corner now.
In fact, I didn't actually hear it when I was there. It was only when I subsequently watched it on a video that I realized what the policeman actually said to Tan. But yeah, it was basically that he was saying about what he was obviously viewing as a swastika on Tan's face, that was a public order issue or something of those.
Can you believe it? And Steve rightly started to go off at him there, you know, and I was watching and said, you know, if I was there, I probably would have, maybe not quite as loudly as Steve, but said virtually the same thing, you know, and I've been in enforcement many years ago.
Absolute appeasement of the bullies and the thugs.
And of course, the policeman got it wrong. Maybe that was part of Tan's thing as well, is like there's this subtle trolling. So have the swastika backwards, because most people don't know that. And even I looked that up. I'm like, okay, I didn't know that it was the backward one was a Buddhist symbol. But because, you know, it looks like something, and that's the human nature, is we just take something, we don't look into it closely enough. So everybody thinks it's a swastika. And of course, that's the policeman fell for this as well, and then asked, or perhaps demanded, Tan leave. And I wish Tan hadn't left, to be honest, especially now that he's left the country. I wish, no, I'm not leaving. Please arrest me. And let's take it further.
That's the second, if not third, or might even be fourth time that Tan's been asked to leave by the police. And of course, you know, the Dawa teams love it every single time, because they immediately put their videos up saying Tan's been arrested, which is absolute nonsense. I'm not aware that Tan's ever once been arrested. But he's simply been advised to leave the park, at least on one occasion, for his own safety. But, you know, the police are doing it to remove Tan, to reduce the problem, rather than tackling the real problem, which are the violent thugs that want to.
By the way, with the prayer, if anybody is interested, it's very easy to stop them from praying. All you need to do, are you allowed dogs in the park?
Yes, you are. Black dogs in particular, isn't it?
Yes, you just take a black dog, stand in front of the prayer, and they are going to run. Get a girl standing next to you who says, I'm menstruating. You should see how they scatter.
Yeah.
Do you reckon a toy black dog would have the same effect?
No. It needs to have saliva. It's the saliva of the dog. Because remember, you're allowed to do dogs for hunting, but you're not allowed to do them for anything else. So, it's if a dog licks your hand, then you are impure for life and you immediately need to wash and 5 times and blah, blah, blah.
Yeah.
Oh dear.
But anyone that's ever visited any area of India or that part of the world, or even been to London, so if you walk through Southall, there are these reverse swastikas all over the front shops
Of course,
and everywhere.
Yes. This is where Hitler actually got it from.
Yeah.
But Steve, you made a good point as well when these Dawa people there was going, oh, police, we support you. You quite rightly said, oh, well, you don't support it when you're asked not to pray, which is in fact a legal park policy that they are legally enforcing. Then you guys are very critical. So you don't say, well done, police. I mean, obviously the disingenuous and hypocritical nature of these people. It's like the brains are on vacation. Half the brain is working, the other half has gone somewhere else in another dimension or something. Quite happy to praise the police when Tan is removed for doing nothing but standing there shouting, which is part of what Speaker's Corner is about. But then, of course, like you say, then they'll cry rivers when they're asked not to pray. And I saw that one Indian guy who thinks he's a very smart guy in one of the videos holding a camera there. He's some Indian guy. I think he spoke to you at one occasion. He spoke to other people and certainly seems very impressed with himself. And he was one of those guys that were doing it. So anyway, I think that's been... So thank you for bringing us up to date on all of these things for those who don't follow it. I've got some crazy comments which I'm going to leave for the next show, otherwise we won't get to the slavery thing. But we've all been talking, and Abu's been so quiet there. So Abu, is there anything you want to add before we sort of move on to the slavery side of things? Or maybe you can also add something to the slavery as well, hopefully. If you are there, or have you taken a little wander? Abu, are you there? Hello, Abu.
Yeah, he left to be right back.
Oh, okay, cool. Fair enough. Good. All righty then. Anything else you guys want to add before we go into?
So I was just going to say, with Tan's departure, obviously this Sunday is going to be interesting because I'm sure they'll be all jumping on that and trying to use it for their own benefit.
Yeah. So you'll have to continue the baton, Steve. Not that you've never given the baton up anyway. Tan was just louder and perhaps a bit more direct on every single occasion, which you are very direct anyway. But you're a little bit more articulate, I'll have to say, than Tam. So it's probably going to be left to you. I don't know anybody else that's quite as vocal as either yourself or Tam. Sarah used to be, but he's not there anymore.
But Steve, do you think they'll be gloating?
I just think they'll view it as, they hated Tan, they didn't want Tan there. He's now gone, and they'll just be making any nonsense up. They'll be saying he's gone because he was a hate preacher. See, we've been telling you all this time he's a nasty hate preacher, and now the British authorities have listened to us, and he's been banished.
Yeah, but that makes them look this makes them look so weak. They have no arguments. They only have legal repercussions. They only have technicalities to go against. They don't have any arguments. So when he was there, they didn't have any arguments. So he needed to get banned so that they can feel better. So it actually shows the opposite if they do that.
Yeah, but they're so unself-aware.
Exactly.
They won't see it. They will see that as a victory, as opposed to see it as as a weak position for them that they can't defend, because the level of psychological development is extremely low. And so, of course, just like a juvenile child in a playground, they will see that as a victory, as opposed to, hey, here's somebody that I, if I had good reasons and evidence and arguments, I would be able to persuade him or viewers that he's incorrect. But I mean, that's just...
Yeah, and exactly what happens if he's going to be back next week? What are they going to say then?
Well, yes, that would be great, wouldn't it?
Yes, well, if not next week, in 6 months. One last thing, because it did come from TDS Dave, and we can't let a question from TDS Dave go. Steve, at Steve Speaker's Corner, did you see the Moses video attacking the Muslims? So maybe we need to talk about that very briefly before we carry on.
I was there.
Did I see that? If not, Steve, can you just explain it? Because again, you were there, so you're in the thick of all of these things. But there was a video allegedly showing a non-Muslim hitting this masked Muppet Muslim, the one that shouts and also was very threatening towards Tan. So maybe you can just share on that one as well.
Well, so firstly, I know a lot of the comments and videos online are saying about Christian man hit Muslim. I'm not aware that Moses is a Christian. As far as I'm aware, he's atheist. He's a non-believer. So that's the first point. Now, the second point, and I've seen this time and time again, that with that lovely chap, the masked Muslim, let's call him that. I don't know if that's what
I just say the masked Muppet.
the masked Muppet. That would be more appropriate, wouldn't it?
No,
Is
he's Burqa Boy.
he's a what?
I call him Burqa Boy.
Burqa Boy, yes. Covering his acne, I think. So yeah, he is I'm trying to think of what polite word to use. He's an ignorant thug. He's continually baiting people, and I think this is what they've all been doing for a long time. I think this is why Tan, had the cheek stroking all this time. They're baiting people. They're baiting people, and they want a physical, violent reaction, so they can then turn around and point the finger and say, "No, no, 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 no. You said we're the violent thugs, but look, you're the violent thugs." I think that's what they've been actively, consciously trying to achieve.
Yeah.
And they finally achieved it last Sunday. I don't condemn what Moses did. He shouldn't have lashed out. But it is what they've been trying to get. Moses, if I speak to him regularly, he's comes across as a genuinely nice, decent, quite mild chap. But clearly, they pushed and pushed him, pushed his buttons, and he reacted violently, which he shouldn't have done. But let's still keep it in proportion. He didn't leave a mark. It was a shove more than anything else.
And there was even a video with Ali Dawa going, "Oh, he didn't really hit you. He's obviously, he can't fight, blah, blah, blah." So he kind of made fun of it in another video when he was standing there. So there's a video with Ali Dawa and this masked Muppet standing there. But you can see it's the same thing with Hamid. If you look closely at these guys, and I study their, how they respond and stuff, he was standing there pretending to play the victim. But you can see when somebody is putting something on, they're doing more than what's natural to them. He's natural. Just like Hamid. And the moment they try to appear reasonable and rational, you can see it's like being put on. So this masked Muppet is standing next to Ali Dawa, who's now giving us the run through Ali Dawa's style and his view on it. And this masked Muppet goes, yeah, I could have hit back, but I forgave because that's what Islam does. But you can just see that this is like somebody who's read a script and been told or been persuaded to say these sort of things.
It was completely and utterly scripted. And the other reason that I say all of this is that the second it happened, the masked Muppet, he tore away and dashed over to the other side of the square where the police van was sitting. He could not have rushed away quicker. Now, he wasn't doing that for his own safety. He wasn't doing it thinking, I'm about to be really beaten up badly here. He ran over, he scarpered over to the police to squeal, to say, "Oh, I've just been hit. Go and deal with him.
Yeah, but this is like in football when, as anybody of the other team comes close to you, you suddenly fall to the ground and hold your ankle.
Yes, exactly. Hollywood style.
So it was a hilarious moment in reality. The fact, it was so scripted, it was so staged. They'd been trying to achieve that reaction for so long, and which is why, all credit to Tan, because he never ever gave them an inch. He never reacted. How many people, if they sort of came up and stroked your cheek like they used to do to him on a number of occasions, would not hit out, would not smack them back. But Tan just stood there and took it calmly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
So of course, as soon as that happened, I knew, that would be all over the Dawa channels, and they'd be absolutely reveling in it and turning it into, everyone says we're the violent thugs, but look, we're right, we're not. It's you lot that are the violent thugs. Absolute nonsense, scripted, prepared, dashed over to the police to get major impact. I've heard, and Raj told me this yesterday, I don't know how definitive it is, that no charges are being pressed. And I know when the police did take both the masked Muppet and Moses off in separate vans, and I know a lot of people were saying to the police, it was handbags at dawn. It really was absolute nothing. Don't listen to the nonsense that you're being told about it. It was a very, very minor incident, but that had been what's the word? encouraged by the
sort of blown out of proportion. Because I think you're exactly right, Steve. Now one of the approaches is, hey, let's see if we can actually get somebody to do something so we can be the victims. Because at the moment nobody sees us as the victims, and every time Mars Muppet and other people like him open their mouth, they just, it casts a shadow over all Muslims, unfortunately, and certainly the Muslims at Speaker's Corner. And so that approach obviously is really awful. And he's been, I could say, spoken to, for want of a better word, by Hassan of all people. What's his name? The Caribbean Hassan, the black Muslim guy who I don't rate can say anything more than, a juvenile as well. Even that Hassan was saying to him, hey, and then Shamsi also had this video where he was speaking to this guy as well and tried to explain to him about free speech. But you can see it's like hitting, a metal wall and rebounding. The level of intellect and psychology there is just, I don't know if he passed school. If he did,
exactly. And it must have only been 5-10 minutes later. Ali Dawa was chasing me around the corner. He was desperate to speak to me with one of the Dawa channels. They now have a roving camera on wheels.
Yes,
so they've got a tripod and it's got wheels on, and the camera, it was a Benny Hill moment. It really was, because they were sort of Ali Dawa chasing after me, desperate to say something to me with his camera tripod on wheels, following behind him. And it was absolutely as we were saying, what are you going to say now, Steve? Look, a Muslim's just been attacked. What have you got to say now, Steve? How about grow up and go home?
That's what we say, like children.
Yeah, they don't get it. They just don't get it. I think, as Rob said, they don't have any self-awareness. They don't look. They don't realise what complete and utter numpties they look.
But this is why Speaker's Corner at the moment is the most interesting thing in Dawa, Gandhi, whatever world. Nobody else is bringing out any kind of interesting videos. Everybody's so focused on Speaker's Corner in the UK at the moment.
Yeah, and of course it's all these guys just like giving entertainment and drama value. I mean, like you said, they don't have anything from a good reasons and evidence point of view. So it's all about drama here, and so that's what it's been reduced to. So entertaining, I guess, to some degree, but certainly not intellectual or any good arguments there.
Raj says exactly. They have no sense of humor. This is so true.
Yeah. Cool.
Okay, let's talk about slavery a bit.
And let's move on, shall we, to Islamic slavery.
What is that? There is no such thing.
Yes, so they tell us, and it's it wasn't really that. So I've got a few things I'll do here, and I'm sure Stops and Abu and anybody else can join in here as well. So I'll do a little bit and we'll stop and perhaps chat about it, etc.
Didn't you? Because I actually once, I need to find this. I created a shop window, and it says "Help Wanted," and I changed it. I changed it into "Slaves Wanted, Inquire Within," because this is the kind of image they want to give to the slavery in Islam, that this is just another kind or form of employment.
Yes. Right. Let's do this and present this to everybody here. Hopefully you can all see that. I can't see the chat, so you guys can just keep an eye on the chat there. So this is a very interesting document that somebody gave me that's pretty thorough, and read a little bit and discuss it here. So the Arab slave trade, called Sub-Saharan African slave trade, around the year 600 to 1980. Can you believe it? 1980. How many slaves? Around 120 million slaves. I knew I'd seen that number somewhere. Men were castrated, women were taken as sex slaves. Islamic countries were the last to abolish slavery, pressured by Western countries. And here's a list, obviously, of the countries when they actually abolished slavery. So, as always, lagging miles behind it. There you can see a pretty sullen and terrible picture there of all those slaves there, and probably the slave masters on the left-hand side, I'm guessing there with the turbans and so forth, and the rest are all slaves there. And I suppose it's hard to imagine, we talk about this and there's, it's just something that happened in history, but just imagine, the numbers here and what they did to these people. And then they want to turn around and obviously point fingers at the colonial slave trade, which I don't think any of us would deny and we would condemn today. But somehow Muslims want to, sidestep and tap dance around this sort of thing. So there was an article from the BBC in 2001. Europe did not have a monopoly on slavery. Muslim slave traders also exported as many as 17 million slaves to the coast of the Indian Ocean, the Middle East and North Africa. Some historians say that between the years 1500 and 1900, 5 million African slaves were transported via the Red Sea, the Sahara, and East Africa to other parts of the world. In Africa, unknown numbers, according to some estimates, at least 4 million died in wars and forced marches before ever being shipped to another continent. And I'm reading a little bit of this so people can come back to this if they want, and hear some of the books as well. There's some reference books and some documentaries as well that one can do. So if you type these books in, if I just do one of them here and open that up, if I just open that link, for example, I think this goes to Amazon if I checked it. So there these books are for anybody that's interested. Perhaps in time I'll get to read this, but if anybody wants to, then here's one of a number of those books. And here are some of the documentaries. So if you pause the video here, if you rewatch this and you are interested in looking back at this, I'm going to go and look at all of these, then that's worth it. And here is, and again, I could read this. I'm just going to page through it without necessarily reading it at the moment. We could come back to it if necessary. But here are some of the hadiths where this particular person has managed to highlight some of the slavery and so forth here. I'm just going to page through it just as to give you an idea. And here, these are all hadiths. Okay, this one is the life of Muhammad, so that's slightly different, but there's many of the hadiths here, and they've highlighted it. So this is a fairly well-researched thing. I'll give this document to anybody because it's a Google document, and I think there's even a bit more here. And there was things where they're subjected to violence, or was it all peaceful, etc. So there's a great deal here on slavery that as I say, I can give to people. And if you're interested, we could read some of these things. But I want to open it up to everybody here, and maybe stops as well, and Abu and Steve and TJ, whatever your views and whatever other information you've got on this, because I think it's something that Muslims need to be reminded of and should be shameful of, as we are with the colonial slave trade. So discussion, guys, open it up to you guys.
Well, I'm still busy being disgusted.
I mean, there's just a picture of it, isn't it? I mean, yeah.
Okay, one thing. Okay, I know that a lot of apologists, Muslim Islamic apologists, say it wasn't so bad. This is fabricated. I've had a guy come up to me and say, "Well, don't you think that a black guy who was taken as a slave to Riyadh had it better in Riyadh than if we had left him to die in Malawi?" And these are the guys I just want to, violently slap, because it's so amazingly cruel and crude to think like that. But a lot of the people have been indoctrinated to say, number one, it's not as bad as people make out. Number two, well, the whites did it in America, North America. And number three, the blacks were actually better off because it says that you have to give them food and clothing, which they wouldn't have had in the southern Sudan, where they would have died of famine or something like this. And this is what makes me so incredibly angry and so incredibly sad at the same time if I think about it. But the worst is, it gets worse. This is the thing. What you have shown is the above board slavery, straightforward slavery. If you go to the text, the hadiths of Muhammad, this I think is always the worst of the worst of the worst. When Muhammad goes and tells his people, enjoy your orgasm when raping female slaves, go ahead and enjoy it, because Allah decides who gets pregnant and who not. So don't worry about the prices of the girls on the slave market. Just go and enjoy your orgasm. And this is attested not multiple times, but dozens of times in Sahih Bukhari and Sahih Muslim. So there is no excuse for any of this. And I think that is the worst.
Have you got any references to hand stops? Because
I've given this list so many times. Yeah, sure, I can do that.
Okay. Because yeah, I think you have. In case any viewers who haven't heard of this, which is unlikely, or want to dismiss it, then obviously the source is always useful. Thoughts from Abu, Steve, TJ, what's your view on this? Have you heard anything about this? Have you had conversations with Muslims about this? Has any Muslim, here's a question, has any Muslim actually acknowledged it in the same way that we would have acknowledged the colonial slave trade?
No, I've tried to
extent,
bring
no.
the conversation a few times, and it's, yeah, they don't want to entertain any discussion on this subject whatsoever.
I mean, I've heard excuses like, it wasn't as bad as people make it out to be. Like, they were eventually freed, blah, blah, blah. But there was never an abolition movement inside of Islam that I know about. And obviously the theology goes strictly against that. I mean, yes, you can free your slaves, but there was never an actual, abolition movement like there was in America. Or in England, for that matter. I think it was with Bishop Wilberforce, correct?
Yeah.
Yeah, so that never came about. And, that was actually a recurring theme when, the Islamic invaders came into India. They would, they would come in, fight, destroy temples, and take the women and sell them back on the slave market. So it was just a recurring theme. I forget, I think it was the first guy that came into India and invaded, Muhammad bin Qasim. I heard he took back like 20,000 Hindu girls or something of that nature back to Baghdad. So obviously it's just a recurring theme. And people don't talk about the white slaves that were enslaved by the Barbary pirates. And they don't talk about that. So I think it's kind of hypocritical to say that the whole slave trade was a white colonial settler apparatus. I think that's, the Arab slave trade was 100 times worse in my view. So, but nobody wants to talk about it, obviously, because they're going to be called racist. So, I guess you guys should check your white privilege, huh?
Yeah, it's kind of selective. It's something that is never taught in school or anything. You never see any movies about it. Or, I mean, there are many like Western movies that condemn the European slave trade. But
yeah, and that was America's first actual declared war. After independence was with the Barbary pirates. It was when Thomas Jefferson actually, I think it was Thomas Jefferson and John Adams went to the Tripoli ambassador, and Jefferson wrote about this, and he basically, to sum it up, the ambassador told them that it was written in the Qur'an that they could pillage and make slaves of infidels, and I think it was Jefferson specifically said that we have no beef with you. We weren't involved in the Crusades. America was just formed. Why are you guys doing this? And obviously he justified it according to his holy book. And yet that letter has kind of been suppressed because that spells it out, letter and verse. But people want to make up, other excuses for it. So.
But TJ, we need to be very clear here as well. Slavery was not invented by Muslims. Slavery was not invented by Islam. Slavery has existed for as long as there have been humans. The thing is that we have abolished it. We have decided you cannot own another human being as property. This is the central message that I want to get across. So while Islam did not invent it, they took to it like, well, yeah, okay. And then what happened? They refused to let go. And this is why we still have this today, because it is so bloody convenient to just get some people from another country who are less fortunate and have them work for you and not have to pay them. You just give them whatever crumbs fall off your table, whatever clothes you don't want to wear anymore, you give them to others. It's just so bloody convenient. And this is the problem why a lot of countries still keep slaves. Yes, I am a slave as well, if you want to call it that. But I'm not a slave because a lot of people are now making it out that if I get paid for my work, I am a slave of sorts. No, I am not.
No, of course you're not.
This is the thing. This is just playing with words, where people are saying, well, this is near slavery. And the people in Bangladesh who are sitting in the factories sewing for Nike and so on, they are slaves. No, they are not. Yes, they are paid very, very badly. Yes, they are abused, but they are not slaves. The definition of a slave is somebody who gets abducted, gets sold as an object, and then has to work as an object, as property. It has a financial value assigned to it. This is what my definition of slavery is. And this is why we need to appreciate this has happened a lot of times. It has gone on. And the second thing, what we need to appreciate, that Muslims went as far as Ireland. They went all along the coasts and abducted women, primarily women, and brought them back and sold them on the slave markets. Those are the things. This is the foundation for slavery in Islam. And then you get the texts, and then you can take a look at how it was actually instrumental in establishing the wealth of the people in those countries.
Yeah, and
I think and I also think it's important to note that, this has divine sanction. There's no really way to tiptoe around it. That it was a historical reality, but it also had a theological basis. So I think to ignore the second part of it, and yes, slavery has existed throughout many, all, if not most, most societies, but particularly in Islamic societies, I mean, it was divinely sanctioned, and I think that gives it a different caveat. I think.
But Stops, can you, and Abu as well, and TJ, can you speak to Muhammad owning slaves? We all know he did, and he traded in them. But somehow, again, the apologists want to make out as if he was not a slave trader, and he actually came there to abolish it. And they always quote, I'm not sure if it's a Quranic verse or a hadith, where it's like, hey, you can let them go, or you can, and he paid to have one go. And of course, they're only painting that one side, trying to show that he's this wonderful guy, that he came there. And this is the hilarious part. They then say, but hang on, he had to do it slowly, because if it had happened all at once, well, people would have got upset. And of course, they forget that he's got freaking God on his side, and he can call angels when it suits him to win a battle. And yet he can't prevent slavery from the day that he gets these revelations. He's got to do it slowly, because otherwise people might rise up. Presumably God wasn't powerful enough, or neither was he, to prevent these people rising up. Had he stopped it instantaneously, then there would actually be something we could admire here.
Yeah, no, it's total rubbish. I mean, even the Quran, you can see immediately that freeing a slave is supposed to be a punishment. It's a financial impact. It's a loss, a financial loss. That's what it is, and you can see this. It's very, very obvious. And then, of course, in the hadith, and even more so in the seerah, in the biography, you see this even more. Absolutely. So this is absolute bullshit that this was there to be abolished. Absolutely not. Totally not. I mean, look at 424. It even says you're allowed to have sex if the women are married. It's in the Quran. It's not only in the hadith. Of course, people today are trying to pick the right hadith, and that you can't. It's in the Quran.
Yeah, and even beyond that point, once the Muslim soldiers conquer an area and it becomes part of the Islamic State, those women who fall, as basically war booty, their marriages are annulled basically immediately. So don't forget that portion too. Is that those non-Muslim women, as soon as they come into the possession of an Islamic State, their marriages are null and void. So don't forget that part.
Yeah, I think it's a case of reminding some Muslims who want to claim that Islam is the and Muslim, well, certainly Islam anyway, is the perfect way to do things, of the Arab slave trade. It dwarfs the colonial slave trade by what was it? Numbers I've seen is around 8 to 10 million. Taken from West Africa to Europe and the US, and here we have up to 120 million. So more than 10 times the number over an extendedly much longer period, but also Europe and the US, stopped slave trading. When was that? Does anybody know? Has anybody have a date off the top of their head for when slavery was abolished? Certainly, I think the UK was the first country, was it?
You mean in the US?
Or who was the first country? Was it the UK? My history.
It was I know that UK was before US,
Well,
but
it must be some 18 something, but I don't know when.
1833, the Slavery Abolition Act, I think it was, in 1833. Yeah, in the UK, because I think I forget which amendment it was in the Constitution. I should know this. I forget, but it was post-Civil War. But I forget the amendment.
And do you know by any chance if these were Christians or atheists?
Well, Wilberforce was definitely a Christian. I know that.
So Christians brought it in and they abolished it.
Yeah, I mean, I think the theory with that, or at least the mindset behind that, was like divine rights. From what I understand, I mean, it's one of those things. I mean, the Old Testament does sanction slavery. I don't think I don't think the New Testament directly, or I don't think Jesus talked about it specifically.
Right, he condoned it. He said,
Isn't there
some your masters, slaves, obey your masters. That's what Jesus said. Yeah.
No, I think that was one of the apostles who said that, I believe, if I recall correctly. I don't think Jesus actually spoke to it or spoke about it, but I think I forget which apostle it was who said the quote you just said.
Jesus definitely did, TJ. Jesus did say something about slavery. I think something that Stop said. Yeah, he definitely. I mean, I'll take a small wager on you on that. It could well have been the apostles as well, but I'm pretty sure that Jesus also spoke about this. It wasn't just the apostles, but obviously, just for a moment, compare Jesus to Muhammad. I mean, what does the panel think as a comparison in terms of being a moral person to follow?
I mean, Jesus didn't have slaves himself, but
fathers, do not provoke your children to anger, instead bring them up a discipline. Slaves, obey your earthly masters with respect and fear and with sincerity of heart, just as you would obey Christ. That's I don't know, how do you pronounce Ephesians 6.5.
Yeah, I think I forgot who wrote that book, but yeah.
This Joan Peter guy that you think is a troll, he's like, you have to be consistent about Christianity. Like, yes, look. Yes, Christianity doesn't there's no, I'm not aware of any true condemnation of slavery, and definitely in the Old Testament there is a lot of slavery stuff. But
the Quran is full of it. Come on. Why would the Quran give you so many different rules and regulations on how to treat slaves if slavery was abolished? Why would it tell you left, right, and center, if you do that, your punishment is that you need to go and release a slave as punishment? Come on, please. Yeah.
The Quran is more explicit. It goes into detail, and then read Surah An-Nisa, for example, where it goes into and then you can marry this you can marry 4 wives, and then you can take a slave as well, and don't be. It's more explicit in Islam, and it's more explicit that it's systematized, and you make war.
If you have a child with your female slave, exactly, it regulates to a T all the things that you must do and mustn't do.
Well, I mean, even then, bring up the whole, it's kind of, bring up Christianity in this situation, I think is, just kind of, trying to muddy the waters. I think that, I mean, if we look at both of them, Jesus, versus the Prophet of Islam, I think that we can tell that they are actually worlds apart from each other, I think.
I mean, I agree with you that Jesus is a lot more moral. He's by no means perfect, but all you need to do if you want to talk about slavery and Christianity is get Matt Dillahunty onto one of his rants. Excellent with that. The Christians scatter to the winds. I mean, I'd love to see Bob the Builder try and answer Matt Dillahunty on slavery, but we focus mostly on Islam. But I, so But by far, the Islamic or Muslim slave trade with these Arabs dwarfs anything else. I don't know if there's ever been that sort of volume of slavery in any other sort of historical references. Maybe they have, but I'm unaware of it.
But you need to also be aware of the very, very fundamental differences between the well, what should I call it? The U.S. and the Islamic slave trade, or Christian and Islamic slave trade. The Islamic slave trade was predominantly women, so it was predominantly for the harem, for sex slaves, because in Islam there is no limit. Again, there is no limit on how many sex slaves, on how many concubines you are allowed to have. It's as much as your money, your wealth, or whatever can afford you. There is no limit in how many concubines or slaves, female slaves, you are allowed to have. So the wives is 4 or 9, depending on how you read 4:3, but there is no limit on the sex slave front.
And I remember too, I remember seeing a video from Memory, MEMRI, that think tank or whatever, or that, I don't know, whatever they are. There was a female Egyptian scholar who justified slavery, and then she was like, obviously, this only occurs with non-Muslim women. And I think she says something to the effect of he can have sex with her to humiliate her or something of that nature. I'll try to find the video. It's actually, she spells it out chapter and verse, actually. I'll try to find that video.
This is wishful thinking, yes. like one of the, I remember one of the hadiths actually says, we got some excellent Arab women as booty. So they are actually differentiating here between Arab women and other women because of the inherent racism that they have, because the black women were normal. An Arab woman was seen as something much of a higher value. And then, of course, you had the white women, especially the ones with the red hair, who were, treated and sold for record prices.
Stops. Are you aware of a black slave called Anjasia? I've posted in the back chat there.
Well, maybe.
Suhail Bukhari, 73-182. Allah's apostle was on a journey, and he had a black slave called Anjasia, Anjasha, Anjasia, I think it is, and he was driving camels very fast.
Fast, yeah.
Does that ring any bells?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, there's a lot of them. I mean, is it in the Quran or Hadiths where Muhammad actually trades people for weapons and all sorts of provisions? So it's explicit. It's there. You can't deny this. I don't know why some Muslim apologists go and say, well, no, not really. I mean, it's there. You can't deny this. You can't just say it doesn't exist. You can't close it. It's the same, with Aisha. You have this thing that Aisha wasn't 9, because now all of a sudden it's embarrassing for the Prophet of age 54 to have sex with a 9-year-old. Marrying her at 6-year-old is not so bad, but having sex with a 9-year-old, that seems to be sort of nah, not really. So they're trying to get her to be 17. So they're going off. Now ask somebody, because they always have this building up. They say, well, if Aisha was this, then she must have been like at the battle. She was not allowed to be at the battle unless she was 15. So she must have been 15 at the Battle of Uhud. And this was nobody knows. And they are going into all sorts of constructions here, where they are saying, well, she was 10 years younger than her older sister. How do you know this? Where do you get your information? And this is why all of a sudden they are drawing from dubious sources just because it says what they would like them to say. This is like Subur finding, going trawling the internet. Where is there a guy who makes a quote somewhere in a book which I can use against the theory of evolution? And this is how they do it. This is how they then say, well, you see, here the guy says it's against the slavery, and therefore what we are doing, we're abolishing slavery. No, you're not, because you're forgetting about the 586 other sentences which say the exact opposite. Just because you opposite, just because you find one sentence which says he was nice to his slave, does not mean that the entire Islamic slavery now was being nice to the slaves. And this is what we need to look out for.
Yes, exactly. And I just want to bring this up.
By the way, I put that link in the chat box.
Yeah, so
it's a female scholar from Al Azhar University.
Yeah, here it is. So here is this Islamic scholar says Allah allows Muslim men to rape non-Muslim women to humiliate them. So there they've got one there in chains. Professor Sood Sahel, I'm terrible with the pronunciation of these things, reportedly said rape allowed between times of legitimate war between Muslims and their enemies. And this is the thing I hear stops Nabu and TJ and Steve a lot, and you probably do as well, Steve. Hey, it only happens in war if it happens at all, and it's obviously way better than leaving them to starve and die. And so, you know, it's never an offense, it's always defensive.
Yeah, you hear this a lot, but it's absolute total nonsense. This is the point. The problem is that most people are not in the topic. Most people have never taken the time to read up on this. What a lot of people have is just some, you know, bits and pieces they hear here and there. And then if somebody says, "Are you sure about that?" This is what Adnan Rashid does a lot. He makes a statement, and then somebody says, "Well, actually, it's not like that." And then he will say, "Are you sure about that? I'll give you time to think about it," which makes you unsure if you do not, if you're not 100% sure, if you're not sure that you've actually read it and you remember the source and everything. He will ask you, "Are you 100% sure?" "I'll let you think about that." Because they're trying to get you to be a little bit unsure, because the uncertainty for them looks as though they can be more certain because they're declaring something with confidence, which is not true.
Yep, quite right. You know, here's a picture of it as well. Dr. Andrew Holt, professor of history at Florida State University, said Sahal's alleged comments are disheartening, coming from a professor from Sunni Islam's most prestigious university, which is 1,000 years old. His concerns that the statements could be viewed as approval for the enslavement of Yazidi women by barbaric ISIS, also known as Daesh. So, yeah, there's obviously, and there's another, you know, we just need to let that sink into the brain. This is, you know, in modern days, we're not talking 7th century here. This was,
if you scroll up, the video is further up where she. I mean, it's if you just simply have hit play. I mean, just see for yourselves.
Careful, you could be running into copyright here.
oh, okay, fair enough. We'll leave that then.
Yeah, people can watch it for themselves, but she spells it out, you know, pretty.
Yeah, I'll pop that into the main chat for anybody that wants to go and you know, read about that again. But again, I'm TJ. I'm less. I mean, that's something you can bring up, but I'm a bit cautious with bringing up selective scholars, because obviously the Muslim response is, well, who's she? She's just one person. She's got her own opinion. She's probably wrong. I can bring you 10 other scholars that don't say that. So. Because I'm always thinking, what is the response from, you know, the Dawa apologists? Because, you know, all they're trying to do, they can't actually rebut it. So all they're trying to do is try and shift it so that, you know, there's more people that say the opposite or whatever the case is. So a single scholar from, you know, a newspaper article in and of itself wouldn't be convincing per se.
Well, yeah, I mean, you know, that's when I say, well, if it goes against the teachings of Islam, then why hasn't a major Muslim, you know, group, you know, I don't know, clergy body or somebody come out with a fatwa saying that, you know, if you capture, you know, Kafir girls and you have sex with them, or like you take them as slaves, that you're no longer a Muslim. Why haven't we seen that fatwa yet?
I don't know. Maybe there is one out there. Who knows? I'm sure somebody will dream one up though.
So I mean,
but that's why I'd like to have somebody like this Abu Laif character from Saracens, you know, whoever Saracen follows, and ask him all these questions and see, does he respond? Does he acknowledge these things? Does he try and reinterpret them, ignore them, sidestep them? You know, So maybe we can try and, if we get hold of Saracen or somebody knows him, perhaps we can see if we can get this Abu Laif onto the show here, who seems to be an Islamic scholar according to Saracen. So.
Yeah, but he's a reformist. Okay, so yes, he acknowledges all these things, but he will say this has changed, and then he will bring you something which he reinterprets. Okay, this is something I learned from the Quranists. They will go to the extreme where they will even go and say the word Nisa doesn't always mean a woman. So it doesn't really mean that you are allowed to have 4 wives, because it just means friends. So you can have 4 friends. And this is what you should restrict yourself to, because if you have more friends, it's not good for you. So this is the dishonest way of what they are trying to argue. If they have a statement from the Quran which is vague and ambiguous, and you are able to interpret it, and that's what they do.
Well, I mean, even then, like, there's a chapter called Spoils of War.
Not really. No. It's not spoils of war. It is the things that challenge you in your brain as a daily challenge that you need to overcome to go on the right track towards Allah.
Yeah. Just that. So is there any other thoughts and comments? I mean, I think it's fairly clear that, there was massive Muslim Arab slave trade over, 1,200 odd years or a bit more. And then, of course, like we said, there's a couple of verses in the Quran, but there's plenty in the Hadiths as well. And there's all these photos. Now, again, I suppose the Muslim apologist will go, hey, these are not true Muslims, the no true Scotsman fallacy. And hey, actually, if they just followed what we said, because we seem to understand it, or, the modern scholars say X, Y, and Z, they would have outlawed it. But, that's not necessarily the case, is it?
Well, they go, they say, what it says is the people the right hand possesses. In other words, you are the master, you are the boss, and the right hand is the one which is normally governing the horse, or the carriage or something. So all that you are doing is you are guiding your workers in the right way that you want them to work for you. And this is why it says they're not slaves, but they're the ones that the right hand possesses.
Yes, and so, Stops, let me get your view on that, because that's obviously one of the ones that Bob the Builder took down to Speaker's Corner. In your view, is that a cut and dried case of a Quranic verse explicitly stating that you can own slaves?
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So there's no way to dance around that. Or
no. If you take all the sentences combined, there can be no other way of interpreting it. What they're doing is they're taking them one by one. But what I always say, if you do something like this, always put them side by side. Then you can't go wrong.
What do you mean by side by side? Having the different verses, you mean?
Yeah. That you don't go through them one by one and one after the other, because then it gives you time to go and find the right apologetic thing for each verse individually. No, put them next to each other. And then say, okay, look at the common theme that runs through this thread here on a horizontal basis. And that's when they then need to take the entire picture and come up with something which you can't.
So the only thing that obviously the apologetic that I've heard is, hey, we only take slaves in times of war. So some people will acknowledge that their slavery has happened and goes on, or did go on, or whatever the case is. But then it'll be a case of, hey, but this only happens in war. And hey, what other choice is there? Do we leave them, once we've slaughtered their entire tribe, apart from some women and children, potentially, maybe, well, what do? We can't just leave them there to die. So we'll take them as property.
Yes, it's even worse, because the story is, we are sitting at home, minding our own business, praying to our God, and then these violent people come and attack us because they are jealous of us, and they go and attack us and want to take everything away. So we defend ourselves, and because we are better trained and more disciplined than they are, we defeat them, even though it's a 3-to-1 ratio, and then all that is left is the women. And now, because we are such good people, we only defend ourselves, but now we even take in the women that are left over, because we don't fight them. No, we take them in, we put them, under our wings, and we take care of them.
Yes, exactly. Oh, by the way, it just reminded me, because you mentioned, everybody's just sitting there minding their own business, doing their own praying. I heard this on one of the videos again recently from Ali Dawa. Muhammad was just such a nice guy, and they chased him out of Mecca. he was just minding his own business, and these other people chased him out of Mecca. Please stop. Can you respond to this?
No. Oh boy. No, there's a reason why he was chased out of Mecca. He was going on everybody's nerves, including, well, like, this is how the story goes, is according to his uncle Abu Lahab, which is mentioned in 111 in the Quran without explaining anything about it, because 111 is only like 8 or 9 sentences, but it's all about what an asshole, what an idiot, and he should be burnt, and he should roast in hell, and his wife should be damaged, and blah, blah, blah. This is only because he did not accept Muhammad, and Muhammad got so angry that he went on everybody's nerves saying, you need to, you have to, and if not, you're going to burn, and if not, it's going to be terrible, so you need to listen to me. And everybody said, listen, leave us alone. We are selling our 360 idols here. This is how we make a living, and you are destroying us. You are bringing us bankruptcy with your stupid idea of this one Gabriel who comes and talks to you, and all this is nonsense. And anyway, who are you that somebody comes and chooses you anyway? So he kept on doing this until they said, no, we need to get rid of him because now he's really destroying us. So they plotted to kill him, and he got hold of it, and then he escaped by the skin of his teeth. He ran away.
Yes. I wonder how the world would have been different if he hadn't managed to escape, huh?
Well, this is the same with Hitler, you never know.
Yeah.
But again, I need to stress, there is no evidence for any of this, okay? This is all stories. This is all things in the hadiths and the biography. We don't know if there's an inkling of truth here, okay? I'm always very skeptical of any of this, because I don't believe it at face value. Really, I don't. There's no evidence for any of this, and that's it. I need to stress
So
this.
would you not accept, if there, or what sort of historical evidence would you accept, Stops? Or obviously, you I guess you view that there isn't historical evidence for this, but what sort of historical evidence, or from whom perhaps, would you accept that?
Well, look at Alexander. We have corroborating evidence. This is the point. We have people who hated him who say, yep, he came and defeated us. We have statues, we have pillars, we have steles, we have monuments, we have all sorts of things which say, okay, Alexander was here, this is what he did. We have historians, multiple historians saying he came through our area, and then we heard that he left, and then we lost track of him. But what he left here is this and this and this. And from this, we can piece together a historical thread, as it were, which we can't do for Muhammad. All we have is that Muhammad lived in Mecca, that Mecca had a river, had a valley, had olives and grapes and all these, which is impossible. So already, right from the word go, it's impossible that the story was correct the way that it is told. Now, if that part of the story is not correct, is demonstrably wrong, what part of the rest of the story is then correct? Why should I believe the rest, especially since there is no corroborating evidence? There is nobody who noticed a Muhammad, not mentioned anywhere. If this was such a brilliant character, such a charismatic guy who conquered all of Arabia, why does nobody mention him?
Yeah. Well, obviously they mention him later on, or he becomes mentioned later on, doesn't he?
Yeah,
obviously the Muslims will claim that
they construct the letters that apparently allegedly he sent to all these people saying, well, listen, you can come and join me now, or I'm going to conquer you. And okay, where these letters don't exist. So we only have copies and copies and copies of some events, and that's it. Then they say, well, the Quran has never been changed. Well, you find the older Qurans, you compare them, they're different. How does that work? So whatever claim the Quran makes about itself is wrong. Doesn't matter what it is.
Of course, the Muslims will claim, no, his companions, passed it down, verbally, and the verbal chain of transmission is just so brilliantly fantastic. And so that corroborates everything.
That's why suddenly they come to their senses and say, well, actually, Aisha was not 9, even though they have all that.
What's that? Where's that?
No, suddenly they say that what Aisha says is not so authentic, even though it has the isnad, it has the contents, it has all the requirements of an authentic hadith, and suddenly they're saying, well, it's not that authentic because now we don't like it anymore, so now we need to change it a bit.
Yeah, but isn't that more the Shias there? Maybe there's some Sunnis, but the Sunnis and speakers.
No, Saracen, this Abu Layth is also doing it. They're saying Aisha wasn't 9, she wasn't 6 when he married her.
Oh, right, okay.
So all of a sudden, all these ideas, look at the slavery. No, slavery wasn't that bad. It was abolished. I mean, all the ones, the hadiths and everything that say it was so bad, well, actually, we'll need to take that with a pinch of salt.
Yeah. I mean, the people in Speaker's Corner generally were trying to defend it, and Ali Dawah was doing it again recently, or attempting to. He married her at 6, but he waited 3 years till he's 9. Now, why would a guy who was just such a pedophile wait 3 years? Is Ali Dawah's question to somebody. And now somebody's got to come up with an answer. Otherwise, according to Ali Dawah, he couldn't have been a pedophile because he waited 3 years.
Yeah.
That's the response now. I mean, obviously, he hasn't dreamt this up himself. I don't think he's bright enough to do that. So somebody said this, and he's now repeating this. Well, that's an interesting question. I wonder, now all we need to do is get these non-Muslims or these hate preachers or these Islamophobes or whatever other nonsense words they dream up whenever they've got nothing else to think about. All we'll do is now we'll ask them this question. Why did you wait 3 years?
I would immediately ask her, so you're acknowledging that she was 9. This is the point.
Yeah, but you must see it. There was another video, but I'm going, it's the same old nonsense we've heard, many times over. But she was what was the word? For me anyway, and again, Stops and everybody else can add their comments there. For me, the nail in the coffin is informed consent. And so it doesn't matter what other things you're going to say, whether she menstruated, whether she had a doll, didn't have a doll, as long as we know the age, then, informed consent, just as far as I'm concerned, that's the end of the story. There's no ways that she could have consented, in being informed of a consent at that young age. So I'm not interested in anything else. I don't care how many scholars say what. I think, and of course, when you ask them, which is what the point that we've made before, would you allow your daughter to marry a 50-year-old? Then I've never yet, and maybe there's a video, maybe Steve, you've had one, where a Muslim has gone, yep, I would. I've never.
If it was Muhammad, yes.
Oh, if it's Muhammad, I don't say that. Normally the question is phrased as, would you allow your daughter to marry a 50-year-old? And I've never heard a Muslim just say yes to that question. But maybe.
No, never.
Yeah. Steve, can you do a kalam?
Can I do a kalam?
Oh, yeah. Get everybody to give a thumbs up.
No.
Speaking of which, give us some thumbs up, guys, if you enjoy the conversation. If you'd like to hear specific topics, please post it in the chat. Type it in with the Jinn&Tonic show. So if you use this name in the chat, then we'll be able to see your questions and or suggestions. So if you've got any other topics, one of them was jurisprudence, which again, Stops was potentially going to do tonight, but I think we'll save that for another time, and we'll add that to something else because Stops was saying somebody was interested in understanding the jurisprudence procedure, etc. And Stops said, he could go through that quite quickly. So that may not be worth an entire show unless, Abba's got more that he wants to add to that. So that's something like that.
I also want to say that it probably helps. Thumbs up helps. And also, if you share the video, and also you can press this notification bell to the right of the subscribe square.
Yes, please subscribe if you're interested. Click the bell, then you'll be notified, because sometimes we don't set the show up until the same day, i.e. like today. I only set the show up today once we had finalized the title and agreed what we were going to do. Sometimes we'll do it ahead of time if we've got a guest or I know what the next topic is going to be. So please subscribe so you'll get notification in your sort of favorites list. What do they call it?
You have to press the bell to the right of the subscription
box.
But
does that get counted anywhere? Does that influence the value?
Yes, yeah, I think so. I think it influences the algorithms.
What do you mean? The bell, you mean?
Yes.
But what it definitely does is in your subscriptions, it'll show up, and live streams show up at the top for us for a time. So when you come in, you'll see the live streams. The YouTube is filtering the live streams to the top, and that's how you get a lot of viewers. So live streams like this, if you type in something live, or if you are subscribed to multiple things, the live will come very close to the top. So that's a good reason to click on the bell so you get that subscription notice. Otherwise, you won't see it in your subscriptions appearing on the day.
Anyway,
There you go.
I see it anyway.
Oh, you do, yeah, but you obviously link to the account, so that's possibly different for you. But people who are just subscribed.
Ah, okay. I never realized that. Okay. Is there a strong case that Muhammad was mythical? Who is more mythical? Jesus. There is no difference between Jesus and Muhammad. The thing is that Jesus has been investigated more. There have been more claims surrounding Jesus. So you have all this Tacitus, Josephus, Eusebius, blah, 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 blah. And if you look at them, you will find none of them actually mentions Jesus except for Josephus, but the TF, the Testimonium Flavianum, is actually a fake, which everybody knows. So everything has been gone through with Jesus, so we know for sure that there is no evidence for Jesus. With Muhammad, it's a little bit more complex because we only have 4 or 5 sources, and that's it. And there, Muhammad is not mentioned except for once. The problem is that if you have MH, in other words, MHD, MHT, and because of the different ways of writing a name, anything can be constructed as meaning Muhammad. Now, there are several letters where people say, well, this is where it mentions Muhammad, but it doesn't actually mention Muhammad. And if they do, this would be Muhammad saying the Jews have their land and they are entitled to their land and they are going to keep their land forever and ever, and I will attest to that, which is not something that Muhammad would ever have said. So there's different levels of information that we are getting for the existence of Muhammad, but evidence, none of them.
There's another question here. Are they, I'm guessing Muslims, using any excuses for modern day slavery? So things like, obviously Libya and some of the other relatively recent modern day slavery. What are the things that Muslims are saying?
Giving them a better life, absolutely, all the time.
Yeah, or the traditional one, which is, hey, if it was in some kind of a warfare or there was some kind of conflict going on, then yeah, otherwise they would have left them there. Then the poor people wouldn't be able to survive on their own. So, being good, wonderful, moral Muslims, we started to own them as property, and that's better than leaving them there to die, as if they couldn't take care of themselves, or they were.
Exactly. Which in some cases they can't. This is true. But is that enough of an excuse to own another human being just because he's better off with you? I'm sorry. Maybe I'm hard-ass, but no.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, if you were to take pity on them, that's why these days, Geneva Convention and various other things, you will imprison or somehow round up people, but you'll still feed them, and they've got rights and all the rest of it. So if they really were moral, that's the sort of thing they would have done, or even better, something that we have yet to come across, that we would have gone, hell, these guys are incredibly moral. Nobody else thought of this. We haven't even thought of this. These guys are amazing. And typically, what do we find? They just did what everybody else did in the day. And of course, he had Allah's backing anyway, so he could have changed things instantaneously. And presumably, if he was going to be a prophet for as long as he was going to be, nobody could have touched him. I mean, he could have called the angels. Allah would have protected him, as apparently he did.
Like he split the moon. But this ties into the question that is being asked here as well. Can this be reformed? No, it cannot be reformed. You can reform the Quran to a version 2.0, but you cannot destroy the central tenets. You cannot go and say all of a sudden men and women have equal rights. There is too much in there that reduces women. You can't. Do you see Muslims as people seeing themselves following the Prophet's example, preaching in Mecca? No, I don't think so. I think this is choosing and picking. They take a couple of things that Muhammad did, and they say, well, we're just following the Prophet, we're just following his example because we love him more than we do our families, blah, blah, blah. it's bullshit. If you go and ask them, what specifically are you following? What specifically are you doing? You'll just get a blank stare.
Right. Another sort of comment question there. Kalam is working on an assumption that Islam can be reformed in some way. He still holds out hope that Islam can somehow evolve into today's civilization. Now, that comment comes on the video that we posted earlier where Kalam was following Saracen and this Abu Leifta guy, and they were doing some speech somewhere, and then there's a video of them outside in the street having a chat and all that sort of stuff. So I'm guessing Clive King is referring to that video and assuming that Kalam is working on the assumption that, hey, these are pretty nice guys, and if we could just get their version of Islam, into mainstream, everything would be, a lot better.
Yeah, and the reform has already happened, is ongoing. It's evolution right in front of your eyes, because today most Muslims are better than their God. That's the fact. That's the way that it is. If most Muslims were not doing that, were following the Islam, down to the letter, we wouldn't be around, or they would have been wiped out. Depends, because only 20% of the population are Muslims, and only something like 20% of those are fundamentalist or whatever Muslims. So I don't know what will happen there, but it definitely would not work out well.
Question here for Steve. Could you ask Steve, when you have a free moment, did he see the video put up about the guys goading him about his video about pray in the park?
No, I didn't. Don't think I have.
Okay. So I don't know how to pronounce this fellow's name here. Suliran, if you can post the title of the video, because you can't post a link, but if you can post the exact title of that video, then we can do a search on YouTube to find that.
Hey, just a quick question for everybody, because I'm just curious to get your guys' viewpoint. Like with the grooming scandal, or should I say the rape scandal within the UK, do you think that has an Islamic sanction?
No. None that I know of. Okay, I need to contradict myself now, because you just saw from this woman in Egypt who said that raping non-Muslim women is a show of humiliation. And this is the Quran says that you are allowed to humiliate, and this is the jizya. If you are a dhimmi, if you are living under a Muslim, this is a show of force, and that you are being humiliated at the same time. So this is only if you're living in a Sharia conditioned state. But what they are doing is they're simply pretending that they are, and saying, well, we are the best of all the nations anyway, and Islam will dominate as a religion anyway. So what we're going to do now is already act as though we are, and we did, and we have, and therefore humiliate the girls, so we're not doing anything wrong, because at the end of the day, they are inferior to us, and therefore we can humiliate them. This goes back to the list of Umar. I don't know, we've done a show on this as well. So there's a lot of concoction going on here, how you can justify this and how they do justify this for themselves. But it is possible using Islamic sources, yes.
And it stops as well. The other thing is they can interpret this as an ideological war or some kind of a war, and as long as they can interpret it in such a way, then they can do this. Now, some of the other Muslims go, no, you're not at war. We're obviously obeying the rules of the country, etc., etc. But some of them can just interpret it, and the moment they do that, then they're allowed to do any of those sort of things. Here's again, give me your thoughts on this. Here's 3 phases of Muslim immigration, and maybe sort of rather short, but somebody's view on this, and I wanted to get the panel's thoughts on this. Phase 1. Muslims are few in number, and they feel like Islam is being oppressed. So they play the victim, claim Islamophobia, and are more tolerant of others. Phase 2, large minority, indignant Islam, threatening, demand Sharia law, intolerant of infidels. And phase 3, clear majority, dominant Islam, They're militant, strict with Sharia law, kill and subdue all infidels. May not obviously play out as strictly as that, but is that kind of what we have seen in Muslim countries where they have eventually become the large minority and then eventually the majority?
I think we're seeing it in Belgium. I mean, Belgium has sent the most amount of, ISIS fighters, and their population, I think, might be more per capita than, I would say, most other European countries, if not all of them. I think that speaks volumes.
Followed by France, followed by Sweden.
Yeah, exactly. So they say that Sweden is going to be Muslim majority, I think, by 2050, if I recall correctly. And you can see that they're basically the rape capital of Europe.
Yeah, they definitely are bending over backwards to avoid disclosing crime statistics that involve immigrants in all ways possible, and then censoring or censuring police authorities or law enforcement officials that try to present that information. And apparently,
that's why I think the current left government there is going to lose, because they got elections coming up in September. So it's going to be interesting to see, because I think people are fed up. I think the Swedes are had enough, and I think there's going to be backlash of some kind. It might be political, or might be on the streets or something. But something is going to go. I mean, something's going to happen. I think eventually, because if I come to your house and I take your stuff all the time, every day, I mean, eventually you're going to get fed up, and I think.
Okay, I just pulled up the Muslim Brotherhood Explanatory Memo, Northern America. And there you have exactly this. You have the concept of settlement. The term was mentioned in the group's dictionary, various meanings, and so on.
Is it something you can share on screen, or?
It's a PDF.
Oh, okay, no worries.
And there you have exactly this. You have the settlement, you have the establishment, you have the stability, you have the enablement, and then you have the routing. So the process of settlement follows exactly those lines. This is exactly the program of the Muslim Brotherhood. This is what they're doing. There are some steps in between, and they're outlining this. Shift from the partial thinking mentality to the comprehensive thinking mentality, shift from the amputated partial thinking to the continuous comprehensive, and so on and so on. They outline this. This is pages and pages and pages, Arabic first, English afterwards. So you can read this in both languages. So if anybody wants to look for the Muslim Brotherhood Explanatory Memo, Northern America, I don't have a link for it. I just found this on my machine now, because this is something that I kept, because this is the only document that we have. We don't have the original manifest.
Can you copy and paste the title of the PDF, Stops? Because we can search, because obviously you've got a local copy, but perhaps myself and others can search online to see if we can find that PDF.
Sure, this I can do.
Just copy and paste the title.
Do you have it saved on your computer?
Yes.
Maybe I'm interested in that. Maybe you can.
It's in the chat now, and in our chat here, I'll put it there as well.
Okay, good.
Look for this and you should find it.
Another quick, sorry, carry on, Stops. You want to say something?
No, I just want to see if I can see the title. Obviously, I can't read the Arabic title, but the title in the front is about Islamic society. Oh, they give you all the abbreviation. It's an explanatory memorandum on the general strategic goal for the group in North America. An introductory concept, process of settlement, comprehensive settlement organization, In the name of God, the beneficent, beloved brother, I, Almighty God, Yeah, no, that's all I have.
Here's a link to it. It's on the Clarion Project website. So
you found it? Excellent. Good.
I'll post that in there. Question, just a separate topic. It's coming up in the questions, though. We're trying to answer questions, not on this topic necessarily. Jinn&Tonic, were you about to have a conversation with Kenny Bomer? Did it happen? So for those people who don't know, Kenny Bomer is a white Muslim convert / revert for 30 years, lives in Texas. He had a falling out and disagreement with some of our friendly ex-Muslims, Abdullah Samir and the other gentleman. I forget his name. I can see his face clearly, but I forget his name. and he was going to come on here and teach us all a lesson and educate us, etc. And a couple of hours before he was due to come on, he let me know that he had an extreme family emergency, and I've not heard from him since. And I'm not going to say that that wasn't the case, and obviously I wished his family and whatever else well, but we've never heard back. So no, we've not had Kenny Boma on, and since the family emergency, he's not contacted me again to reschedule, and I haven't followed up with him. So that's where we stand on that. Just looking here to see if there's any other questions there.
I'm not going to repeat what I said at the time.
Fair enough. Abdullah Gondal, thank you. Answer yes. Abdullah Gondal and Abdullah Samir were going to have a.
Oh, that was great. Yes.
They were going to have a debate with him, and then they produced a video. One of them did, didn't they? What was that video? There was something. It was a video about presenting a verse of that sounded like a verse or appeared to be a verse of the Quran, which is obviously what the Quran says. Hey, if you can bring a verse like it, then do so. And so either they had done it themselves, or they had presented a verse that somebody else had done, or a short paragraph was in Arabic, and somebody was reading it off, and then they were asking people, which is this part of the Quran, or however they did it. I can't remember, but he got wind of this Kenny Boma, because he was going to have a debate, and then decided no, he wasn't going to. This was blasphemous and insulting, etc., etc., and so he wasn't prepared to have that. And then somehow I got in contact with him. I don't even remember how. Somebody must have sent it to him, or whatever the case is. And yeah, we never got any further. But apparently somebody else was saying he was on with Christian Prince at one point.
Wow.
Literally, and so they were on for about half an hour or something together, and Christian Prince was grilling him, and he was attempting to respond, etc. And again, that didn't go well. But no doubt he will come out of that saying that he dealt with Christian Prince, as many of these delusional Muslims do, seemingly.
Well, he insulted me because there was nothing left for him to do.
Yeah, so that's Jinn&Tonic. Kenny Boma is here. Oh, is he? Well, there we go. So I'm still waiting for Kenny Boma to contact me if he wants to come on here. Then fine. After his showing on with Christian Prince, I don't know. Maybe he's got a different version. So Kenny, if you believe that you adequately answered Christian Prince's view, and I watched that video, I'm obviously of a different opinion, then again, feel free to contact me, or you can come on live now if you wish. So post something in the chat, and you can come on here and educate us, particularly about the Arab slave trade. Unless you're going to be, I would suspect or hope, honest, and agree that Muslims and the Arab slave trade was a massive issue and not something that can be dodged. It needs to be acknowledged. And if it does, then what is your response? Were these good Muslims, and how on earth could they have done this for 1400 years if Muhammad was the wonderful guy that people were supposed to follow as an example? Clearly, hundreds, thousands of Muslims didn't follow the example if he was a wonderful guy, or maybe they did follow the example and he wasn't quite so wonderful with slaves. Which one is it?
And come on the Surah Like It, we did this when we still had Hassan on the show. He came up with a couple of things. We asked Muslims, because in those days we had, the show was big. Okay, there were a lot of Muslims in those days, and we asked them which one of these is from the Quran. We gave them 4 different possibilities, options, and they said which one is Quran, which one is not. They were not able to pick the ones from the Quran.
Did you do that in Arabic, or did you do it in English?
Arabic.
Okay. And were these people Arabic speakers, or were these just general Muslims?
No, Arabic speakers.
Oh, interesting. Okay.
I sent them to you, remember?
You probably did. I don't remember specific off the top of my head. It's probably somewhere around. I do now that you mention it. Yeah, I do remember that. But then again, of course, the response is, well, hey, they're not scholars. Send it, get a real Arabic scholar, a real Muslim scholar, and he won't be fooled.
Bring us the Arabic. Yes.
They're just too busy doing their scholarly stuff to come on here, I guess.
Hey guys, I gotta go. Thanks for having me.
All righty, teacher. Thanks so much.
Good weekend, guys. Take care.
Take it easy. Thanks for coming on. So is there anything else? Steve, how often do you, in Speaker's Corner, I mean, I think you mentioned it happened one or twice. Do you hear it being talked about a lot? I mean, you might not have brought it up, or maybe you have, I don't know. But the whole slavery thing, does that come up regularly as far as you're concerned?
Does what come up regularly?
Sorry, Muslim slavery.
No, not very often. I often try and throw it in, but it doesn't last.
It doesn't sort of get into conversation. So
No.
again, they've seemingly got answers that they think are sufficient to answers. No, this wasn't really the case. Or if they do acknowledge slavery, it's because well, that wasn't the most moral thing that could have been done to a tribe after you've slaughtered everybody else. Take those people and look after them and give them the same clothes, and sometimes they can sit at the same table and all that sort of stuff. But obviously they'll be owned as property, and somehow that offsets, to whatever degree they supposedly treated them well. And again, like you probably said, Stops, many times as well, that's probably a very extremely charitable with no evidence view. Maybe there is. Is there? Let me ask you, Stops. Is there, or Abu? Is there anything in the Hadith or the Quran that says how well slaves were treated? Not by Muhammad specifically, but by anybody else.
In that time?
Yes, in that time. Yes.
I mean, slaves were not treated well. I mean, for example, the story of Bilal, the black guy that made the first mu'adhin, that Abu Bakr bought, and he bought him for expensive, like for a lot of money, and then he freed him. So, according to the Hadith, the slaves were. But he was kind of tortured because he converted to Islam when he was a slave to a pagan in Mecca.
They often hold him up as an example of, how, a slave that was released is just so amazing, because didn't he go on to become some kind of a leader, if I remember correctly?
No, that's a different one.
Oh, okay.
But there was such a thing. Yeah. One of the slaves went on to become the administrator in one region, yeah.
And obviously they pointed that as an example of, look what happens, once we take a slave and release them, they can go on to become, somebody very important, and, so on.
Look, there are like the releasing of slaves. I don't know, like literally it's like releasing of the neck, maybe. I don't know how you should translate it exactly, but there are mentioning of the virtues of releasing slaves, but there is also a lot of other verses that like take slavery for granted and like says that it's okay to have slavery. So it's not that, like, yes, releasing a slave can be a good deed. It can be a kind of philanthropy, but there's nothing wrong with having slaves, and it's like you should take slaves in times of war, and then you can use them for various purposes.
Yeah, and I think that sort of, for me, the nail in the coffin is there's no verse in either the Hadiths or the Quran, as far as I'm aware, that you guys have ever mentioned or that I've ever heard, and I'm sure it would have been shouted from the rooftops, that outlaws slavery. If there's a verse that said, you shall never own another human being under any circumstances.
No, quite the opposite. It talks, I think, I haven't counted that one, but I'm pretty sure the verses that talks about, for example, just take Surah An-Nisa, for example, all the different verses that talk about how you can have sex with slaves and so on, those verses are way more numerous than the verses that talk about freeing slaves.
Yes, exactly. Cool. Well, I think, is there anything else on the slavery thing, the Arab slave trade? Because I think we've covered it. We've also got that resource. I've paused the screen. So if anybody's interested, obviously you can go and look up those books, the documentaries, etc. And there's tons and tons of hadiths and so forth as well. So I think it's quite clear that there's no way, Muslims can sidestep this Arab slave trade, Muslim Arab slave trade. And the numbers are quite shocking, up to 120 million. So now at least I've remembered, because I thought it was in the 100 million, but some places I've seen 50, 60 million, etc. So
Rob, something I forgot. The most obvious thing I forgot. Yes, I feel embarrassed. Go to Wiki Islam, just enter slavery. You get so many sources. You get Allah's opinion. You get the hadiths. You get you get how many slaves were enslaved by Muhammad, slaves traded by Muhammad. Come on. This is the repository. There you get all this stuff.
No, but hang on a moment, Stops. Hang on a moment.
Brilliant collection.
Islam is just an Islamophobic website. We can't get anything from that. I mean, anybody goes to Wiki Islam, it's just...
Right. Then they quote the Quran. Then show me that the Quran is wrong. Allah sets forth the parable, a slave under the dominion of another. He has no power of any sort, and the other man of whom we have bestowed, da, 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 da. Where is the mistake in the Quran? Why is it, and this I remember, this is not here, this I remember from the top of my head, why does the Quran say that there is a difference between a man who is a man, a woman, a slave who is... No, you need to kill. If a man is killed, you need to kill a man. If a slave is killed, you need to kill a slave, and a woman, a woman. So the hierarchy is man, slave, woman. And why would it mention that in the Quran as 3 different types of people?
Indeed, yeah. Why would it?
Is that, and I'm sure this is somewhere here on this page as well. And is okay, if Wiki Islam is so Islamophobic, then okay, then the Quran is wrong, isn't it? Narrated Abu Hurairah, the Prophet said there is no zakat either on a slave or on a horse belonging to a Muslim. Sahih Bukhari 2:24,543. I mean, how many of these do you want to go through? There's dozens here. This is brilliant.
Yeah. Yeah, somebody in the chat saying you've got the wrong translation.
Yeah, probably. Anyway, this is pages and pages and pages of references, all referring to slaves. They even have hadith referring to Aisha's slave. I mean, Muhammad began seizing their herds and their property bit by bit. He conquered home by home. The messenger took some people captive, including Safiya and her 2 cousins. And the Prophet chose Safiya for himself, but he married a slave.
Yes, exactly.
The Prophet had the warriors killed, their offspring and women taken as captives. Okay, so what more do you want? This is the Prophet himself. This is the messenger. Peace be upon him, of course. A lot of peace.
Just remind me again, Stops. I'm sure you have, and I've forgotten. What is the story with the peace be upon him? But
no, this is just a tradition. This is just this is Arabic, and what you do is special people. This is like remember we had this guy from no, this was Tan who explained the Datuk, because you have different titles for different people. And this is in the Eastern, in Asia, in the Middle East, you have certain titles for people. It's like you used to have in England. You had so and so Rob Esquire, and this is the same thing. The same way as you're writing on a letter, so and so Esquire. This peace be upon him. This is the way you greet each other with peace, and you say to somebody, if you hold him in great esteem, this guy, peace be upon him, said so and so, because this is just a show of respect for that person. This is why you have the different levels. Like Aisha gets a lot less than Muhammad, but gets more than, I don't know, her cousin or something.
right, okay. Gotcha.
Wow. Okay, I can just tell people, just go to Wiki Islam and whatever you want to know. I don't even know why we had the show. All we had to do is go here. It's so obvious. Everything is here. Slavery is part of Islam. Okay? Those who argue that slavery is abolished are ignorant, not scholars. They are merely writers. Whoever says such things is an infidel. And this was in 2003.
Yeah, Saudi Sheikh Saudi Al-Pazan, member of the Senior Council of Clerics. But then again, hang on a moment, Stops. No, but we can't be taking a Saudi Sheikh because we know that that's not the true Islam. So,
yeah, exactly. Everybody has their own version, and if your version of Islam says abolish all slavery, good on you.
yeah, indeed. mean, if we just had Darren Redbeard Hamza's version, it would be, you know, the UK would be this paradise, because at the moment we're heading for hell, apparently.
Yeah.
Well, in some ways we are, but it's not for the reasons he thinks. Obviously, it's more, you know, a restriction on freedom of speech, etc.
Yeah, I'm very depressed about that, I must admit. Bleak.
Yeah, I'm not sure it's going to get any better.
Okay. Abu grilled Saracen on his version of Islam last year and he had no answers. Exactly. This is always my intro. If I do an intro on Islam, I always use the Matterhorn. I always say, look at the mountain, put a Muslim on the left, put a Muslim on the right. What does the guy on the left say? Well, it's a vertical wall. The guy on the right says, no, it's a gentle incline. The guy in front of you will say, well, it's steep on the left, gentle incline on the right. The other guy on the other side will say exactly the opposite. This is what Islam is. You take people, put them on opposite sides of Islam, they will describe the very same thing, but they will give you a very different description. Like a house which is red on the one side, blue on the other. Both people look at the same house, but the one will swear it's blue, the other one swears it's red. That's the way it goes.
Yeah. On that note, if there's...
Is there a Jefferson's Bible version of the Quran Hadith? No, there is no. There is no such thing. What you get is some tafsirs. You get this Rashid Khalifa version. Rashid Khalifa tried that. He said, I'm going to bring the redacted version of the Quran. He made himself a prophet and then reinterpreted a couple of things that he thought are correct or better than the original one, but nobody takes it seriously. So unfortunately, no, there is no such thing.
Good. Well, I think we're getting to the end of the show, unless anybody's got anything else to say. If not, then we can bring it to a close. I'd like to do next week, or either one of two things. And again, if there's some other suggestions or comments, feel free to let me know. I want to do a show on the non-believers and how Islam is according, well, we can ask the question, is Islam friendly towards non-believers? Because according to our resident Imam Guru Ali Dawa, Islam is extremely friendly for all non-believers.
And look at the comment by Lily. The whole Quran was abrogated.
What's that?
The whole Quran was abrogated.
Yes. But also I want to do another video review. People enjoy that. And I've got one at the moment that I'm looking at and doing because it was just so egregious. I see many egregious ones. Then you get a really egregious one. And this one, as it happens, includes Shabir Yusuf and a vegan gentleman. So it was just so egregious that you kind of get that moment where you have the shiver up your back and you're almost forced to go, okay, we need to deal with this because this is just such nonsense. It's incredible.
Oh, so this is with a capital E.
Yeah. So we'll do one of those two things, or if somebody else comes up with something else, that's absolutely fine as well. And with that, Abu, if you would like to...
Okay. Narrated Abu Huraira. When we conquered Khaybar, we gained neither gold nor silver as booty, but we gained cows, camels, goods, and gardens. Then we departed with Allah's apostle to the valley of, and here's wrong in the translation, Al-Qira, but it's Arabic is Wadi al-Qura, the valley of Al-Qura. And at that time, Allah's apostle had a slave called Mid'am, who had been presented to him by one of Banu ad-Dibab. While the slave was dismounting the saddle of Allah's apostle, an arrow, the thrower of which was unknown, came and hit him. The people said, "Congratulations to him for the martyrdom." Allah's apostle said, "No, by him in whose hand my soul is, the sheet of cloth, which he had taken illegally on the day of Khaybar, from the booty before the distribution of the booty, has become a flame of fire burning him." On hearing that, a man brought 1 or 2 leather straps of shoes to the Prophet and said, "There are things I took illegally." On that, Allah's apostle said, "This is a strap, or these are 2 straps of fire." So, but the important part of this is وَمَعَهُ عَبْدٌ لَهُ يُقَالُ لَهُ مِدْعَمْ. So, and with him was a slave to him, one of his slaves, and he is called Midam, meaning the
And the
proof.
slave was dismounting and got hit with an arrow. Is that right?
Yeah, but the point is, this is one of the proofs that the prophet owned slave.
Ah, yes.
Yeah, but I mean, there's morality here, because
Yeah,
he
there
got
is
off
further.
and was killed by an arrow. Nobody knows where it came from, so this is the punishment for something that he did a couple of, I don't know, months ago when he stole something.
No. This is on the same day, I think. Or no, it's not the same day, but this is on the Battle of Khaybar. Khaybar is, by the way, this Jewish tribe that the prophet and his gang sacked. That's why there is this on the demonstrations. There is they say this Khaybar ya Yahud Jaysh Muhammad Sawfa Yaud.
Khaybar will come your way, yeah.
Yeah, Khaybar, oh you Jews, the army of Muhammad will return. But he stole something before they distributed the booty, so he will be burned in the fire.
So he came and gave it back because of this.
But
another guy.
But Muhammad will not be burned in the fire for owning a slave. So what is worse, having slaves or stealing a bit of cloth?
Now you're getting technical.
But just even the way it's written, obviously there's a translation, but, again, assuming that, Almighty Allah wanted all of us to understand it. I mean, it's just worse than a story that one of my children could write down. It just sounds so awful in the sense that, like, it just sounds like it was written by somebody who didn't read, wasn't able to write properly. And maybe that's the idea, as in, like, it's Muhammad and he couldn't write properly, and this is so wonderful. It just, as you were reading it there, I'm like, my goodness, this wouldn't pass first grade in the UK as a story.
Yes, but you're taking it out of context. That refers to the time our prophet of peace beat 70 Tanfidels to death without shoes.
Tanfidel. That's the new word.
Yeah, I think Tan will have a lasting legacy there, I'm sure, for some time to come. And the videos are all online. That's the other wonderful thing, of course.
Muhammad was the first feminist, of course. Mercy to all. Oh, guys, you're so great. The first man to wear makeup. And we never did we talk about this thing that he got his best revelation when he was wearing women's clothes. The best one was Aisha's.
No, remind us.
No, I just wondered if we ever come across this during the show. This is what it says in the hadiths.
Oh no, I don't remember that. I mean, maybe
he was a cross-dresser.
No.
I don't know whether Muhammad wore her miniskirt. It's just that he got his revelation, the best revelations, when he was wearing Aisha's robes.
Come on, now you've put that out there. I wanted to end the show, but now you've put that out there. Can you find the hadith for this, please? And
Abu, help!
Is it Sahih? Is it Sahih? This
yes.
I don't remember that hadith.
Oh, shit, how do I find this now? Shit, why did I keep my shit?
No, it's are you a walking encyclopedia of that?
Yeah, but I can't cite it.
If you know some of the Arabic words in that, I can search for it quickly.
Thank you very much. How can I look for this?
I think the important part to say is that if you're wearing Aisha's clothes, it's hard to work on your tan.
That's a good one. You do have a sense of humor.
Yes, there you go. Comes out late at night. Maybe because it's becoming summer, so Abu is now suddenly getting invigorated here.
Yeah, actually, it's starting to get really nice. I like hot weather, so.
And Steve,
very happy.
Yeah, we've had what the UK will consider a heat wave. It was like over 20 degrees. Everybody's out in like you know, very little clothing, and it's like, holy crap, this is summer. You go to most other countries in the world where they probably have a proper summer, you know, like if you go to my original country, South Africa, they begin, this is mild. I mean, you know, I'm not sure I'm going to take my jersey off. Here, everybody's like, oh, this is a heat wave. I don't know how we're going to make it through the day.
Yeah.
And it only lasts, by the way, for about 3 days, and we're going to have a thunderstorm tomorrow or Sunday, I think. So 3 days, maybe 4, and everybody's like, oh, this is a heat wave in the UK.
Okay, so it's Sahih Bukhari.
Bring it up, stop, so we can see it. Can you or not?
Oh shit! This is a long hadith. The Arabic wording for the last portion he uses to slander goes as that. Okay, how can I do this? Let me quickly do a screenshot. There we go. Ticks, ticks, ticks. Clothes. Okay. Now I need you're making parts of your
Keep bringing it up.
screenshot.
When we get to the end of the show, we should all mute ourselves, otherwise something comes up like this.
Yeah, true. Okay, da-dee.
While Stops is doing that, let me just ask, Steve, are you getting down on Sunday, I take it?
This coming Sunday, possibly. I'm not 100% sure.
Okay. Stops, can you make that a bit bigger? Yeah, it's a shame. Well, hope you do, but I'm guessing you will definitely be down on the 6th.
Okay, so you need to read at the end. So Salama went and talked with the Prophet but did not respond. When the group asked her what the Prophet said, she told them that he did not respond. So they asked her to go talk to him again until he responds. Then the Prophet said to her, do not hurt me with Aisha, for the inspiration did not come upon when I was wearing a woman's clothes except that of Aisha.
Okay, and this is, I can't see, which hadith is this?
Okay, this is at the bottom. You see 2393. Source hadith al-islam.com, display ISB HNAM 2393.
Okay, we'll have to go look that up.
Does he give me the number somewhere?
I just want to make sure that's Sahih so that we don't have.
So the first is from Sahih Bukhari.
Okay, cool.
And this is a rebuttal to Sam Shamood. So this is a Muslim saying what the Christian is saying is wrong because he is quoting this one and it's wrong and da-da-da. Okay, do you want the second one? Abu Bakr, what he was said, Abu Bakr faced that he needed to lift. Later, Umar came and requested permission to enter. The Prophet gave him permission to enter while he was in the state. So Umar finished what he needed and left. Later, Uthman requested permission to enter the Prophet. So Muhammad sat up and told Aisha, take all the clothing that belongs to you.
And that's not quite as straightforward, I guess.
Not quite as straightforward.
No.
But the first one, I think, is very clear, and this is what I remembered.
There you go. Good. Thank you for that. Any last words, or are we all done here, guys?
I'm not saying anything. I'm keeping very quiet now.
No, nothing from me.
Alrighty. All right, guys. Thank you so much. Thanks to Abu, to Stops, and to Steve for bringing us up to date. And hopefully next Friday we'll have some more info if you do get down, Steve. But you've got your ear to the ground anyway, so you can update us if you're available. Thank you to all the viewers, to everybody that commented, and we will be back next Friday, 8 p.m. UK time. Thank you, and good night, everyone.
Yes,
Oh,
good night.
man.
Cheers.